Chapter 573. Qin Wushuang was sandwiched between the two great chiefs and listened to their eloquent conversation. Although he did not speak much, he would occasionally speak a few words that would make the two chiefs nod in agreement. It was apparent that this Qin Wushuang was indeed a moldable talent. Regardless of how one looked at him, it was difficult to find any flaws. The rarest thing was that as someone who had come from the human countries, he did not show any trace of stage fright or inferiority complex. Such emotions were present in many selected disciples of the branch. However, it was not present in Qin Wushuang. On the other hand, ever since Qin Wushuang had stepped onto the path of martial arts, he had done many glorious things. Now, when he was received by the two supreme Dao elite warriors, he did not show any ecstasy of exultation. Instead, he appeared calm and collected. This kind of indifferent attitude was the most admirable thing about this young man. Even if it were any other core disciple, most likely they would tremble with fear and be restless at such occasions. Clearly, Qin Yunran was extremely interested in Qin Wushuang's journey to martial arts, especially the part about saving the 100-leaf Qin clan, ambushing a large group of passing freelance martial artists at the dispersed Praying Mountain, and dealing with the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Qin Yunran loved it and listened with great interest. Qin Wushuang's narration was like a babbling little river that was neither too fast nor too slow. However, Bao Bao on the side would add a few words from time to time. Yet, it was like a perilous wave that represented two completely different styles. Qin Yunran listened as if intoxicated. He roared with laughter. "It's truly marvelous! Third, as a disciple of the heavenly Emperor Eight Gates, if you did not rely on your ancestors, or the support behind your back, I am afraid no one could take care of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, right? Even the son of the heavenly Emperor could not do it." Qin Wushuang immediately said, "Two chiefs, I did not rely on my own power to deal a heavy blow to the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Those fortuitous opportunities, and Senior Lu Xianluo's treasure house, had played a great role." Qin Yunran laughed. "It's nice for a young man to not be arrogant or impetuous. Wushuang, have you ever thought about why all those fortuitous opportunities always fall on your head? This is your own fortune." Graceful spiritual bow. Haha, Wushuang, do you know the story of the graceful spiritual bow? Qin Wushuang was shocked inwardly. He had held onto the graceful spiritual bow for many years, but he really didn't know the origin of this graceful spiritual bow and the story behind it. Bao Bao immediately asked, "Great Chief, is there an allusion to this graceful spiritual bow?" Qin Yunran chuckled and said, "Of course there is." Initially, this graceful spiritual bow was not a divine weapon from the Xian Yuan Mound, but from the distant illusion Heavenly Lake. However, the person who possessed this graceful spiritual bow had failed to challenge the Xian Yuan clan and died before he could return to the illusion Heavenly Lake. Since then, the graceful spiritual bow had been lost. Who would have thought that it would appear in the human countries? So there is such an old story. Qin Wushuang sighed. "I really didn't expect that when I was only at the initial stage of the spiritual martial force. I got to know a big brother and he gave me this. It was a divine weapon. This was truly unexpected. I just don't know where my sworn brother is now." Qin Yunran laughed. "Unfortunately, you only have the graceful spiritual bow and don't have the corresponding shooting sun arrows. If you could get the original 9 shooting sun arrows, the power of the graceful spiritual bow would increase by at least 3 times. Even with your current strength, you would have the confidence to shoot Luo Tongtian to death if you were to face him directly." "It's this powerful?" Qin Wushuang was dumbstruck. Through his experiments with the graceful spiritual bow, at most, it could only kill people 2 levels above it. Currently, he was at the transformation void martial stage. To be able to shoot someone at the perfect void martial stage to death, he already needed to unleash his power. And Luo Tongtian was at the peak of the common mysterious stage. He was a supreme figure that was about to enter the supreme Tao stage. It's this powerful. Qin Yunran was extremely certain, even for supreme Tao elite warriors, under the cooperation of the graceful spiritual bow and the shooting sun arrows, sometimes they would have to retreat. Qin Wushuang looked at this graceful spiritual bow with disbelief. He was rather astonished. However, the jade-green arrow was already so powerful, so it was inevitable that the original shooting sun arrows would be much more powerful. Don't feel surprised. Think about it. His master came to challenge the Xian Yuan clan with the graceful spiritual bow. The Xian Yuan clan is the totem of the Xian Yuan mound, the peak existence in the Tian Xian land. Qin Yunran's words made Qin Wushuang realize something. That's right, since he was challenging an elite warrior of the Xian Yuan clan, how could he be weak? When he thought here, he finally believed it. Qin Yunran said again. However, these 9 shooting sun arrows should have been taken away by the Xian Yuan clan. Whether or not they can see the light of day again, it will depend on their luck. In fact, that Lu Xianlu was also a wonderful person. Unfortunately, in the end, he was killed by Luo Tongtian. He was able to make something like the Supreme Tao 5 Elemental Talisman. Although there is still a huge gap between it and the true Supreme Tao power, in the end, he stimulated the Supreme Tao power of the graceful spiritual bow. It's rare. Qin Chongyang took over the topic and gave a long sigh. Now Luo Tongtian must be regretting why he did not kill Lu Xianlu and kept him alive. This is his personality flaw. He did not kill Lu Xianlu because he wanted to torture him. Unexpectedly, in the end, he lifted a rock and smashed it on his own feet. For someone like Luo Tongtian, even if he had entered the Supreme Tao, he was destined to not achieve great things. Qin Yunran snorted disdainfully. Clearly, he had a bad impression of Luo Tongtian. Qin Chongyang said with a smile. Speaking of the heavenly Luo Taoist sect, should we kill that Luo Henji or not? Since he has become a prisoner, there is not much difference whether we kill him or not. Let's keep him. I have a feeling that we still have a long way to go to deal with the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. Qin Yunran gave a long sigh. That sound of thunder sect and the heavenly punishing villa have already sent supreme Tao elite warriors to the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. I am afraid the day of Luo Tongtian being bewitched by them will not be far away. In the midst of their conversation, suddenly, Qin Chongyang stood up and said to Qin Yunran, Second, I must return to the upright morality hall. I have news that some waves have occurred at the Heavenly Emperor Gate. The Heavenly Emperor has issued a summon and asked the other 7 sects to send their leaders to the Heavenly Emperor Palace to discuss important matters. The Heavenly Emperor Gate rarely sends out a summon every 10 years. I am afraid there is some movement. Qin Yunran did not appear to be enthusiastic as he waved his hand. Just go, I do not have a good impression of the Heavenly Emperor Gate. If I go, it would be useless to argue with them. When Qin Chongyang left, Qin Wushuang would not stay any longer. Following Qin Chongyang's departure, he identified the path and headed towards the plain field town. The plain field town was an extremely ordinary small town under the rule of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. For such small towns, across the entire territory of the Qin clan, there were at least 80,000, if not 100,000. As usual, the morning of the plain field town was so peaceful, so calm. On an open and spacious land, a group of young people sat cross-legged. There were a few dozen of these young people surrounding an elderly man. They were pricking up their ears to listen to the words of that elderly man. Regarding our plain field town, some powerful figures have also emerged. Unfortunately, they did not have a good fate. Master Lu Jin, are you talking about Qin Xiang and Qin Yu, those 2 brothers? That era is too long ago. Could it be that for a few hundred years, no heroic figures have emerged from our plain field town? That elderly man stroked his goatee and revealed a somewhat frustrated expression as if he was reminiscing about the history. he said with a heavy tone. In the recent few hundred years, some young disciples have also sought refuge at the aspiring throne mountain. However, almost none of them have made any great achievement. Ah, when will our Plainfield town be able to produce a few more major figures? This way we will not get bullied by others. While they were talking, a robust man ran over from outside this open space. He shouted, "Everyone, go take a look. People of the Redwater town have come to bully people again. What's wrong? Speak slowly. What's wrong with the people of the Redwater town?" That robust man said while panting, "Isn't it the matter of fighting for that or mine? They killed 3 or 4 of our Plainfield town's warriors. People of the Redwater town firmly believe that the ore mine belongs exclusively to them. They do not allow us to mine it. Isn't this too much of a bully? Didn't they already rule that each side gets half? Motherf asterisk her, I think the Redwater town is deliberately bullying people. Aren't they just relying on the fact that they have some backing at the aspiring throne mountain? That's right, they are bullying us because we don't have anyone above us. Everyone, let's go take a look. Let's fight with these evil bandits." That Lu Jin old man said angrily, "All of you, stop right there. What do you have to fight with these people? Just based on these people, are you going to throw away your lives?" Lu Jin old man? Even if we throw away our lives, it's still better than being angered to death by them. If this goes on, sooner or later we will be angered to death by them. It's better to fight with them. That's right, if we fight with our lives, even if we die, we can at least drag a few people down with us. That Lu Jin old man stamped his feet and scolded, "Stupid, this kind of thing, if you go, it will only make things worse. We still have to rely on the leaders of the town to negotiate." Negotiate, they have been negotiating for decades, but they still can't come to an agreement. Talking about our Plainfield town, can we still live? If this goes on, the Plainfield town will perish sooner or later. Don't talk nonsense. Lu Jin old man was extremely respectful to the leading family of the Plainfield town. The leading family of this Plainfield town was the Plainfield Qin clan. It was also the family of the 2 brothers Qin Yu and Qin Xiang. Initially, because of the emergence of Qin Yu and Qin Xiang, the Plainfield Qin clan had become the core of this town. Although there were no more exceptional figures like those 2 brothers, their line of the Qin clan was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people of the Plainfield town. They were loved and respected. In these years, if it weren't for the Plainfield Qin clan's hard work, that mine would not have been touched by the Plainfield Qin clan. However, as mentioned before, there were people above the Redwater town. For the past few hundred years, ever since Qin Xiang and Qin Yu had died and disappeared, there was no one to carry on their legacy. The current situation truly appeared as if Wang Shower was celebrating the new year. Each year, it was not as good as the previous one. Now, the main force of the Plainfield Qin clan had also gathered together. Although these disciples of the Qin clan did not possess any remarkable strength, their sense of belonging and honor to their family could not be stripped away by any power. Before the powerful Redwater town, they would not compromise. They had all organized themselves and headed towards the direction of that mine. Since the Redwater town was being unreasonable, then they would use unreasonable methods to fight them. The Heavenly Emperor Qin clan would not allow the Redwater town to be lawless. On the other hand, Qin Wushuang only took a little more than half a day to travel 20,000 miles with Bao Bao and Lone at their current speed. When they arrived at the outskirts of the Plainfield town, they dropped to the ground and started to walk. "Boss, a few hundred years have passed. To find a person, I am afraid we must ask around," Bao Bao said. Qin Wushuang said with a smile, "Then let's ask around, pick the older ones." While they were talking, they saw an old man walking down the slope with a long sigh from the small road ahead. This old man was that old man Lu Jin from before. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. More chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 574. Qin Wushuang walked up in a refined and courteous manner. "Senior, nice to meet you." The old man Lu Jin was sighing in despair. He felt that the plain field town was getting worse with each generation and was bullied by others. When he saw a stranger greeting him, he glanced at Qin Wushuang dispiritedly. When he saw this young man dressed in ordinary clothing, he answered casually, "Grandpa, I'm asking you a question." When Bao Bao saw the old man Lu Jin did not stop walking, he scuttled before him with a chuckle and blocked his path. The old man Lu Jin was somewhat displeased. "Where did this young man come from? You don't know the rules. Why are you blocking this old man's way?" "Senior, I want to ask you, is this the plain field town?" "It's the plain field town," the old man Lu Jin answered with a bad mood. "Then have you ever heard that a few hundred years ago, a pair of brothers called Qin Xiang and Qin Yu had appeared in this plain field town?" Qin Wushuang asked again. Initially, the old man Lu Jin was dispirited. However, as soon as the two names, Qin Xiang and Qin Yu, entered his ears, instantly he became spirited, as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Yes, young man, how did you know? Did you come from the aspiring throne mountain? How are you related to the two brothers of the Qin family?" A series of questions were shot out like bullets from a barrel, crackling and popping non-stop. This old man had heard his ancestors talk about the glorious history of Qin Xiang and Qin Yu since a young age. He had lived to 80 or 90 years old and had never done any serious work. His greatest joy and hobby was to publicize the history of these two brothers. In other words, throughout his entire life, he had lived purely in history. At this time, when he finally saw a foreigner asking about these two brothers, of course he was overjoyed at the turn of events. He wanted to hold on to Qin Wushuang and talk to him for 3 days and 3 nights. Qin Wushuang was stunned by the sudden change in attitude of this old man. The old man Lu Jin did not notice at all as he said with smiles of exultation, "You have found the right person to ask about these two brothers. For the entire plain field town, even their own family would not know more than me. I have studied them for a few dozen years. He's definitely an expert in this area." As if he is afraid that Qin Wushuang will not believe him, the old man Lu Jin simply does not allow Qin Wushuang to open his mouth and says again, "Of the two brothers, Qin Wushuang is a bit older and Qin Yu is a bit younger. Their father had a total of 4 sons and 5 daughters. Today, in the plain field town, the remaining 2 brothers' descendants were still the leaders of the plain field town." Qin Wushuang hurriedly waved his hand, stopping the old man's enthusiasm. "Sir, if you can tell me where their old residence is, this junior will be very grateful." Old man Lu Jin was in high spirits. His previous dejection was swept away. "This is even easier. I can take you there." After getting out of the town, there was a silver moon lake 60 miles to the west. There was a giant villa next to the lake, and it was the territory of the plain field Qin. These two brothers grew up next to the silver moon lake and became elite figures of the Qin headquarters. 60 li to the west? Are you sure? Qin Wushuang asked. Old man Lu Jin became anxious as he felt that this question was simply an insult to him, an expert. He immediately said, "I am not wrong, I know their family too well. I already told you, I am an expert in this area." "You?" Qin Wushuang revealed a light smile and cupped his hands in a salute. "Thank you, sir." After he had finished speaking, in a flash, he disappeared into the sky with Bao Bao and Lone. 60 miles was too close. They had arrived in a few ups and downs. Old man Lu Jin rubbed his eyes and looked around with disbelief. How could this person have disappeared all of a sudden? Strange. Old man Lu Jin whispered. Suddenly, a surge of surprise shot out from his turbid eyes. He mumbled to himself, could it be that the elite figures of the aspiring throne mountain have truly come? Or else, why did they come to inquire about this? This is great, It seems that the Qin headquarter of the aspiring Throne Mountain did not forget the contributions the Plainfield town had made to the Qin headquarter. The old man Lu Jin was extremely excited. His withered hands tightly clenched into fists. He said to Sky Cloud, "Heavens, I beg you to bless our Plainfield town and give birth to a few more geniuses like Qin Xiang and Qin Yu. If it's possible, I am willing to exchange some of my lifespan." Of course, the gods would not hear his prayer. However, Qin Wushuang and his friends heard it. Bao Bao said with a smile, "This old man is rather funny. Boss, it seems that we were worried for nothing. Your ancestor is rather famous at the Plainfield town." Qin Wushuang said, "It's understandable. For a small town to have a few exceptional figures, even after a few hundred years, it's normal for people to remember them." In between their conversation, they had already arrived at the Silver Moon Lake. Looking down from the sky, this Silver Moon Lake truly appeared like a crescent moon. Like a pearl, it was embedded in the western outskirts of the Plainfield town. Indeed, it was a natural beauty and a good place for outstanding talent. Although the Silver Moon Lake only had a width of less than 100 miles, the surrounding area of the Silver Moon Lake was filled with red flowers and green willows. It was a scene of thriving vitality. A giant manor rose and fell on the bank of the Silver Moon Lake. It made this pearl appear even more embellished. Qin Wushuang and his two friends arrived before this manor. Each time when Qin Wushuang stepped on a stone slab or a patch of grassland, he seemed to be able to hear the footsteps of his ancestors. That familiar rhythm. "It's strange, there are too few people in this manor, right?" Bao Bao whispered. Qin Wushuang also discovered this problem. Even if the disciples of the clan had gone out to train, at least a portion of them should be guarding the house, right? In fact, he did not sense how many people were inside this manor. For such a situation, it would rarely appear even in the human countries. For such a giant family, how could they not have this little bit of common sense? Were they not afraid that someone would destroy their home? What made them feel funny was that no one came out to stop them when they walked to the entrance of the manor. They were only stopped by the gatekeeper when they walked in. When he asked about their background, Qin Wushuang said with a smile, "We are here to visit the patriarch of the Plainfield Qin clan." "The patriarch is not in the clan." "Then any elder will do." Qin Wushuang took a step back. "None of them are here." That gatekeeper also appeared straightforward. "Then there should be someone who can talk, right?" Bao Bao asked with a somewhat depressed tone. "Those who can talk have all gone to the heavenly stone mine. Whoever stays in the clan will be scolded as a coward." That gatekeeper was rather honest. "If you are guests looking for the patriarch, you will need to come back after a while. Now, the clan is not in the mood to take care of other matters." "What?" Qin Wushuang was somewhat suspicious. "We will be scolded as a coward if we stay in the clan? Are you not afraid that your enemies will destroy the entire clan?" That gatekeeper said helplessly, "What about it? Even if it is destroyed, there is nothing we can do. If the heavenly stone mine is gone, the Plainfield town will also be gone. It's better for the clan to be destroyed than for the entire territory to be swallowed by someone." Territory? Heavenly stone mine? Could it be another conflict of interest? It seemed that there was no pure land in the world. Wherever there were people, there would be martial arts world. Where there were martial arts world, there would be conflicts and conflict. "Where is the heavenly stone mine?" Qin Wushuang asked lightly. That gatekeeper pointed to the south. "Go straight south, it's about 500 or 600 miles. I have never been there, I only know of such a place." "Boss, are we going to the heavenly stone mine again?" Bao Bao asked with a bitter smile. Qin Wushuang said, "Could it be that you are lazy to the point that you are not willing to walk 500 or 600 miles? Then you can stay here." Bao Bao immediately waved his hand. No, I will go, all right?" That gatekeeper looked at these three strange people and could not help but ask, "You three, just who are you? You don't seem to be from the nearby counties." Bao Bao said proudly. We just came from the aspiring throne mountain. Your patriarch is too much. He did not even greet his honorable guest. That's not a big deal, no one is at home when we arrive. That gatekeeper was astonished. Aspiring throne mountain? Are you the heroes of the Qin headquarters? Heroes? Qin Wushuang said with a bitter smile. Why are we called heroes? Of course we are heroes. Without the people of the aspiring throne mountain Qin headquarters, how could there be a stable situation for the entire Qin clan? The people of the Qin headquarters had used their blood and lives to fight for that stable situation. Bao Bao laughed. You are not confused. Qin Wushuang thought for a moment and suddenly asked, Now, who is the person with the highest seniority in the Plainfield Qin clan? How many generations are they from Qin Xiang and Qin Yu? Since a few hundred years had passed, they must talk about it according to seniority. Up to Qin Wushuang's generation, the Eastwood Qin clan had been passed down for a dozen or 20 generations. Then this Plainfield town should have more than a dozen generations. Only, clearly this Qin clan of the Plainfield town was also a martial arts clan. Judging from their disposition, certainly their development would be much stronger than the Eastwood Qin clan. Perhaps there might be some elders in the clan. That gatekeeper stammered. Qin Xiang and Qin Yu, you guys know these two ancestors? Hey, we are the ones asking you, why are you asking us? That gatekeeper said with a bitter smile. The old ancestors of the Plainfield town do not have any seniority to Qin Xiang and Qin Yu. They are of the same generation. Of the same generation? Qin Wushuang was astonished. That's right. Qin Xiang and Qin Yu's fathers gave birth to 4 sons. They are the oldest and the second. Below them there are the third and fourth. The third has passed away early on. However, the fourth, who is our current ancestor, is still alive. This news made Qin Wushuang feel somewhat surprised. He had always thought in a fixed way, and had forgotten that even if the siblings of the two ancestors did not have as much talent as them, it would not be a problem for them to live for a few hundred years even if they had trained to the peak of the spiritual martial force. Not to mention, at the Xianyuan Mound, the perfect stage was not some unreachable stage. Then this old ancestor is also at the Heavenly Stone Mine? Qin Wushuang asked emotionally. Yes, if the old ancestor is not going, I am afraid the situation will get out of control. Qin Wushuang nodded and said to Bao Bao and Lone, Let's go to the Heavenly Stone Mine. The group of 3 set off quickly. To them, the 500 or 600 miles was not a journey. In a moment, they had arrived above the Heavenly Stone Mine. When they looked down, indeed, 2 groups of people had gathered in a valley. They were confronting each other with swords drawn and bows bent. The atmosphere was extremely dangerous, as if blood would flow like a river if there was any disagreement. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 575. Qin Wushuang's group of 3 landed on the hillside behind them and slowly walked towards the bottom of the valley. Now, the attention of both parties were completely focused on the other party's camp. When Qin Wushuang's group of 3 landed, not many people paid attention to them. Qin Wushuang was extremely calm as he walked down the valley and observed the people from both sides. He easily recognized which side belonged to the people of the Plainfield town and which side belonged to the people of the Redwater town. Clearly, the number of people from the Plainfield town was much lesser. In terms of temperament, they had indeed fallen into a disadvantage. However, judging from the situation, clearly the Plainfield town would not yield an inch and did not intend to compromise. With one glance, Qin Wushuang locked onto that elder in yellow robes from the Plainfield town. Although he was old, in fact, he was not that old from his appearance. At least, his hair was mixed with black and white. His face also did not have those unique patterns and wrinkles of the elderly. Only, from the shrewdness in his eyes and the boldness in his gestures, He knew that this elder in yellow robes must be the old ancestor of the Plainfield Qin clan. Most likely, he was ancestor Qin Yu's twin brother, the youngest Qin Yi of that generation. From the temperament of this Qin Yi, he had restrained his spiritual qi and did not show any domineering aura. Clearly, he had broken through the restriction of the spiritual martial force. From the situation, he should be at the refined void martial stage. However, Qin Wushuang paid attention to the entire Qin clansmen of the Plainfield town, and only this one was at the refined void martial stage. It seems that the Plainfield Qin clan is indeed going downhill. In these few hundred years, no exceptional young man has emerged? Inwardly, Qin Wushuang thought this way and raised his head to look at the camp of the Redwater town. When comparing the two sides, although the other side did not have many exceptional people, in terms of overall strength, one could see the obvious difference between them. It was not surprising that this Redwater town dared to occupy the mine brazenly. In a world where strength spoke, even for such a small place, they also respected this rule. On the Plainfield town side, the yellow-robed old man's eyes were like an eagle's, sweeping over the faces of those people from the Redwater town. He lightly said, "Brother Wei, the matter between our two families, do we really have to make such a big fuss?" A tall old man on the other side spoke with a thunderous voice, "Qin Yi, now that things have come to this, let's not pretend to be courteous. It is meaningless to address each other as brothers. This mine belongs to our Redwater town. You've stolen it again and again. We have to settle this account." That yellow-robed old man was indeed Qin Yi. Qin Wushuang listened attentively. A hint of displeasure flashes across Qin Yi's face. He says coldly, "Qin Wei, your Redwater town is overbearing enough. Is it interesting to play the blame game? If you want to talk about this mine, we have a lot of it here in Plainfield town. Your side only has a small part. You are good, you simply said that this mine is yours." Qin Wei sneered and said, "Qin Yi, when are you talking about the past? 100 years ago, Elder Guan he had come to demarcate this mine. At that time, he had already made the decision that the 100 miles north of this mine would become my Redwater town's territory. Could it be that your Plainfield town would dare to go against the will of the elder?" As soon as he spoke these words, people of the Redwater town were immensely proud. On the other hand, people of the Plainfield town hung their heads in dejection. They were furious and helpless. Although Qin Yi was angry inwardly, he was neither servile nor overbearing as he argued with reason. "Elder Guan He, everyone knows that he is the ancestor of your Redwater Qin clan. Of course, his demarcation is towards your Redwater town. However, when we divide the territory, we need an official statement. Although Elder Guan he holds an honorable position, he also does not have official documents and talisman. Therefore, his ruling will not be effective. The border between our two towns must still be demarcated according to the original boundary." Of course, Qin Wei knew the trick within this matter as he said with a cold sneer, "You do have a big tone. Could it be that you feel that with the position of Elder Guan he cannot decide the dispute between two little towns? I only recognize the official document." Qin Yi also held a determined attitude. "In the official files of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, the border between our two towns is this mine. We have 8 points and you only have 2. Now, the Plainfield town has already taken a big step back and is willing to divide the mining equally. Are you still not satisfied? This is the mine of the Redwater town, you guys are mining in secret, why should I be satisfied?" Qin Wei said with a cold sneer, "Qin Yi, if I were you, I would be sensible and take your people and get the hell out of here. To cause trouble, you guys don't have enough resources." As soon as Qin Wei's words dropped, those people behind him all jeered and hissed. Clearly, they looked down on the Plainfield town. For the Plainfield town, each of them revealed an angry expression as they clenched their fists and wanted to fight with their lives on the line. Qin Yi hissed, Qin Wei, your Red Water Town is pushing us too far. Don't be arrogant, the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan is not any other place. Do you think there is no place to reason? For this lawsuit, even if I were to fight to the aspiring throne mountain, I must demand an explanation. Aspiring throne mountain? Qin Wei's smile appeared fearless. Do you think you are qualified to go to the aspiring throne mountain? Do you think the current era is still the same as a few hundred years ago? A few hundred years ago. When Qin Yi heard these words, instantly, as if a firecracker had been ignited, he glared at Qin Wei with bloodshot eyes and shouted, "What did you say? Can't you hear what I said?" Qin Wei was overbearing, as if he disregarded Qin Yi's reaction. He shouted, "I said now is not a few hundred years ago. Who do you think you are, Qin Yi? Relying on your two dead brothers, you have eaten a few hundred years of capital, and you still don't realize it? At the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, without strength, you must have the awareness of being a weakling. Fight for the mine? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself?" These words were without a doubt a great killing weapon. Especially to Qin Yi, it had touched a wound that he could never heal. His two talented brothers had met with misfortune one after another. It had caused the Plainfield Qin clan, which was initially full of vitality, to collapse like a mountain. Although Qin Yi had always worked hard, the difference in talent had made him powerless even if he had the will. He could not turn the tide. After a few hundred years, his strength had only reached the refined void martial stage. His two brothers were already at the profound void martial stage a few hundred years ago. It could be said that the early death of his two brothers was the lifelong hatred in Qin Yi's heart. Within the clan, he also forbade his descendants to talk about the matter of his two brothers. Now, Qin Wei had brought up the old matter again with a mocking tone. This had caused Qin Yi's mood to become enraged. "Qin Wei, you must leave some bottom line for everything," Qin Yi said with a low voice. "Your Red Water Town relied on some background and acted insufferably arrogant. You must know that in this world, the ups and downs are unpredictable. Don't get carried away with your success." Qin Wei laughed out loud. "These words must have been personally experienced by you, Qin Yi, right? Qin Yi, in this lifetime, you have lived a failure. You have lived your entire life under the shadow of your two dead brothers, TSK. Qin Yi's sleeves trembled slightly and a strange glow flashed across his eyes. Suddenly, he shouted, "Qin Wei, go and die." He swung his sleeves and a long whip shot out a ray of yellow light towards Qin Wei's face like a poisonous snake. Qin Wei obviously intended to enrage Qin Yi and was already on guard. He put his hands together and opened a shield in front of him, blocking Qin Yi's attack directly. At the same time, the two clan brothers beside him leaped out and launched two colorful attacks at the same time. Like two dragons playing with a pearl, they attacked Qin Yi's chest directly. This coordination was actually flawless. It was obvious that this was the result of countless training. Qin Yi was caught off guard and was attacked by these two people who attacked later but arrived in front of him first. He quickly swung the whip in his hand and rolled it over a dozen times. Ring-shaped defensive air shields were shot out continuously, wanting to use this to block the joint attack of the two of them. At this moment, Qin Wei also changed from defense to offense. He shook his hand and a long spear pierced over. Carrying a wave of rotating air, with a poof sound, it pierced through 8 or 9 layers of defensive shields and went straight to Qin Yi's face. Qin Yi was greatly astonished. Inwardly, he was greatly shaken as he knew that he had fallen into the enemy's trap. Clearly, this Qin Wei had deliberately lured him to take the initiative to attack. Then, he would counterattack and kill him. In this case, even if the lawsuit were to be brought to the aspiring throne mountain, it would be Qin Yi who made the first move. With the protection of Elder Guan He, certainly these people of the Red Water Town would not receive any punishment. Most likely, the Plainfield Town would be punished. In the time between a spark and a flint, a thought flashed across Qin Yi's mind. I must not die. However, when facing the joint attack of 3 elite warriors on par with him, clearly it would be impossible for him to evade it calmly. Especially the joint attack tactic of the enemy, clearly they had gone through countless training to achieve this effect. A trace of despair flashed across his mind. Could it be that my plain field Qin clan is finished like this? Suddenly, Qin Yi only felt his entire body become warm. It seemed as if his entire body had been pulled by a wave of invisible airflow. It pulled him back fiercely and pulled him out from the whirlpool of the enemy's attack. At the same time, a wave of airflow as fast as lightning arrived first despite being launched later. Like a frightening dragon tearing through the sky, a wave of spear power rolled with dazzling lights pierced out with a loud rumble. The third move of Qin Wushuang's self-created spear technique, Profound Nuclear Move. This profound nuclear move carried a form of bitter airflow as it completely distorted the spiritual qi structure in the sky. As the airflow rolled out, it instantly shattered the 3 attacks of the enemy. As if a monster had torn them into pieces, the spiritual qi dispersed and shot all the surrounding vegetation in disarray. Stone fragments swirled in the air. Including Qin Wei, the 3 elite warriors at the refined void martial stage only felt their blood roiling. A wave of earth-shattering imposing manner pressed down on them. As if a wave had hit them, it made them realize that this wave of destructive power was not something they could resist. There was only one word: run. In one breath, they retreated a few dozen meters and finally avoided this most powerful wave of impact. However, the impact of the remaining wave still caused their blood to roil. They tried hard to adjust their breathing to calm their rolling dantian. Almost at the same time, the 3 of them spat out a mouthful of blood. They had escaped from death. Almost at the same time, these 4 words emerged in the mind of these 3 people. Besides feeling lucky, there were a few extra traces of worry and fear in their eyes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 576. They looked at the person who had attacked them with astonishment. A young man dressed in simple and honest clothing fixed his gaze at them with a cold expression. At that moment, he appeared as if a god had descended to the mortal world with an awe-inspiring presence. On the contrary, Qin Yi was the most astonished. As he looked at this young man, his heart trembled violently. He rubbed his eyes with disbelief and almost thought he was dreaming. Yes, he did not see it wrong. The hegemon breaking formation spear. Once upon a time, this spear was the pride of the Plain Field Qin clan. It was the glory of the Plain Field Qin clan. The owner of this spear was the most exceptional genius in the history of the Plain Field Qin clan. It was also owned by Qin Yi's older brother Qin Yu. In these 3 years, between his facial features, he bore some resemblance to his older brother Qin Yu. Who was he? Who was he? Incomparably fervent lights flashed from Qin Yi's eyes, and he could not suppress the trembling inside his heart. The way he looked at Qin Wushuang already appeared to be a bit blurred. Clearly, Qin Yi's descendants also saw the strange reaction of their forefather. They walked over with concern and asked in a low voice, "Forefather, are you all right? Forefather, are you injured?" Each of these concerned questions, yet Qin Yi turned a deaf ear to them. Instead, as if he had been petrified, he stared at Qin Wushuang's figure with extreme concentration and seriousness. His eyes revealed a form of fervent lights. Bewilderment, ecstasy, touched, joy, and many other emotions came one after another. Such situation made the people of the Plain Field Qin clan feel confused. However, when they saw the reaction of their forefather, it should not be a bad thing. Could it be that this young man who had appeared out of nowhere was strange? Qin Wei reacted first and shouted in a flustered and exasperated manner, "Who are you? What do you mean by stepping out of nowhere?" The other two brothers also stood over. One on the left and one on the right, they protected Qin Wei from the left and right. Their tense expressions made everyone at the scene feel astonished. The people of the Plainfield Qin clan had always been used to seeing the tyrannical and domineering Qin Wei. Now, when they saw him appearing fierce on the outside but cowardly on the inside, they could not help but feel somewhat astonished. This young man had an ordinary appearance, yet he had suppressed such a vicious person as Qin Wei? Qin Wushuang coldly sized up Qin Wei and said indifferently, "What did you just say?" Although Qin Wei was swift and fierce, being stared at by Qin Wushuang's cold and indifferent eyes, he couldn't help but tremble. The tough words that were at the tip of his tongue were forcefully swallowed back down. What did I say? Just who are you? This Plainfield Qin clan is not related to you, right? Haha, you're called Qin Wei? Suddenly, Bao Bao laughed and swaggered to the front. Are your eyes in your pants? Qin Wei could not understand. However, when he was berated by Bao Bao, a guy with the appearance of a little teenager, he could not help but become angry out of embarrassment. He shouted, "Mister, it seems that the grudge between the Redwater Qin clan and the Plainfield Qin clan does not need you outsiders to get involved, right? Who told you that I'm an outsider?" Qin Wushuang asked indifferently. Are you the only one allowed to have the surname Qin in this world? Your surname is also Qin. Qin Wei drew a breath of cold air. If the other party had the surname Qin and possessed such exceptional strength, he must not have come from the aspiring throne mountain. Bao Bao mumbled, or else why would I say that your eyes are in your pants? Even if you don't know my boss, you should recognize the spear in his hand. This spear? What about this spear? Inwardly, Qin Wei was still somewhat confused. Yet, he did not dare to neglect. You also have the surname Qin? Are you from the aspiring throne mountain? That's right. Qin Wushuang said with a frown. I just came from the aspiring throne mountain. I didn't expect that the famous heavenly Emperor Qin clan had such an unworthy disciple like you. For someone like you, do you deserve to have the surname Qin? Throughout his life, Qin Wushuang hated those people who liked to fight among themselves the most. Clearly, this Qin Wei was such a person. Now, Qin Wushuang thought about those repeated reminders from Elder Guanfeng and already had some idea. It seemed that the heavenly Emperor Qin clan was not as harmonious as they appeared on the surface. Various powerhouses were intertwined and there would always be some unexpected obstacles and troubles. Qin Wei said angrily, Mister, even if you are from the aspiring throne mountain, don't be too arrogant. Let me ask you, who is your teacher at the aspiring throne mountain? Who is your backer? Qin Wushuang said with a cold sneer. I am alone and only came to the aspiring throne mountain a few days ago. Where is my teacher? Where is my backer? If I must say that I have a backer, the Qin clan's lofty and unyielding character, the Qin clan's boundless righteousness would be my backer. Qin Wushuang's words implied a reason. However, in Qin Wei's eyes, these were words from Qin Wushuang to boost his courage. He could not but help to laugh. You are rather eloquent. Who are you trying to flatter by saying these words? Unfortunately, this place is too far from the aspiring throne mountain, the higher-ups cannot hear it. Qin Wushuang ignored the ugliness of this Qin Wei and did not want to get entangled. He said coldly, Qin Wei, with your character, you are worthy to call yourself an offspring of the Qin clan? What did you say a moment ago? What did I say? Qin Wei's tone was no longer as restrained as before. If this kid did not have a substantial backer behind him, then he was looking for trouble. At the aspiring throne mountain, Elder Guan, he was one of the top elders. To deal with him, a young man who had just entered the aspiring throne mountain, he could easily deal with him. You said that at the heavenly Emperor mountain, without strength, you must have the awareness of being a weakling. Am I right? Qin Wei said with a cold sneer. What about it? Do you think that since you are stronger than us, you will eat us for sure, right? So what if I eat you for sure? Bao Bao asked lazily. For a poor family like you, even without my boss making a move, I can slap you to death with one slap. Do you believe me? Although Qin Wei was restraining his fear, he did not believe that the other party had the gut. He said proudly, "Why don't you ask around, which mountain does the Red Water Town rely on at the aspiring throne mountain?" Qin Wushuang took a deep breath. Initially, he did not want to make a big fuss when he had just arrived at the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Additionally, for this little dispute over the mine, for now, no one had died. He still wanted to suppress it and deal with it coldly. "I am not interested to hear who your backer is. I only want to ask you, how do you plan to deal with this mine? The mine belongs to the Red Water Town. Let the people of the Plain Field Town get lost immediately. I can consider letting bygones be bygones." Qin Wei's attitude was still extremely rude and unreasonable. When he saw that Qin Wushuang's tone seemed to be yielding, of course, he followed up his victory by attacking. "No room for discussion?" Qin Wushuang was not hysterical as he still spoke with a calm tone. "What discussion? This is the result of Elder Guan He's ruling. If you want to discuss it, go discuss it with Elder Guan He. Do you have the guts?" Qin Wei gave a cold sneer and looked at Qin Wushuang as if he was demonstrating his power. His eyes were full of provocation and mockery. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly. Indeed, there were such idiots that used a chicken feather as a command arrow. Elder Guan He? Although Qin Wushuang did not see Elder Guan He at the aspiring throne mountain, he knew that although the elders held a respected position, above them, there were the 3 chiefs and the 12 honored warriors. Even at the level of the elders, there were differences in strength. Not to mention, among the core disciples at the same level as the elders, there were some with respected positions. With an elder as the backer, did they truly think that they were indomitable and indomitable? However, to a local overlord of a small town, how could they listen to these principles? At this moment, Qin Yi walked over and whispered to Qin Wushuang, "Little brother, that Guan He is extremely powerful at the aspiring throne mountain. For today's matter, let them gain the upper hand. We will think of a way later." In fact, when Qin Yi spoke these words publicly, he had calmed down and considered the strategy of retreating in order to advance. Of course, he was also deliberately showing weakness to Qin Wei to numb the other party. However, Qin Wushuang did not wish to escalate the matter. It was not because he was afraid of some elder Guan He, but because he did not wish to cause too much trouble when he had just arrived. However, under such circumstances, when encountering such a person that relied on his power to bully others, the martial saint had no reason to shrink back due to his lofty and unyielding character. Scared? Qin Wushuang had never known what fear was. When facing the inescapable net of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, he had never been scared even when he had a narrow escape. Before a local overlord, how could he be scared? He waved his hand calmly and motioned to Qin Yi not to worry. He turned around to fix his gaze at Qin Wei and said with a cold sneer, "Initially, I thought that for all your previous offense and disrespect to the deceased, I would forgive you this time since we are both from the Qin clan. However, it seems that you do not have the awareness of a weak person, right? Kid, you must understand clearly who is the weak one and who is the strong one." Qin Wei sneered. "Then I will let you understand clearly." After he had finished speaking, suddenly Qin Wushuang's figure flashed and blended into the sky like a wave of meteoric light. Inwardly, Qin Wei's heart tightened. In the next moment, a crisp sound emerged from his face. "Pa!" A fiery slap had landed directly on his old face. In the next moment, Qin Wushuang had returned to his original place. Still, he stood there leisurely as if he had never moved from the beginning to the end. Qin Wei caressed his burning cheek and roared with a hoarse voice, "You! Good kid, you hit me well." Qin Wushuang's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he said coldly, "If you speak another word of nonsense, next time, it will not be a slap." Qin Wei's expression changed drastically. The strength of the other party was too terrifying. Without a doubt, his strength was above his own. The most terrifying thing was the aura emitting from this young man's entire body. This kind of person was clearly not making empty threats, but a character who could definitely do what he said. Qin Wei's mouth moved, but in the end, he did not dare to utter another word of nonsense. He asked in a solemn voice, "Your esteemed self, since you want to forcefully come forward, leave behind your name. Let's discuss it later." Qin Wushuang said coolly, "Discussing it later, that's a matter of later. Today, do you think that it's over just like this?" Qin Wei's entire body felt like it fell into an ice cave. "What else do you want?" Qin Wushuang's anger already flared up. The corners of his mouth revealed a trace of an extremely sinister smile. "Didn't you say it earlier? Without strength, you have to have the awareness of being a weakling. Today, I'll let you properly experience what the awareness of a weakling is like. Kid, don't be too arrogant. I've already transmitted my consciousness to Elder Guan He. He'll be able to rush over in less than half a day. Even if you kill all of us, do you think that you can avoid it?" Qin Wushuang gave a cold sneer and asked leisurely, "Who told you that I'm going to hide?" Bao Bao also laughed and cheered him on. "First, I'll beat you, you vicious dog. Then, I'll ask your master for the sin of not teaching you well." When they talked about the Red Water Town, even Qin Yi was stunned. He was also stunned by Qin Wushuang's reckless and unscrupulous actions. Just who was this young man? Today's 5 chapters, for sure I'll finish it before 2200 hours. Can I finish it with 100 votes today? Haha, good luck. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. More chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 577. Before Qin Wushuang's powerful aura, Qin Wei retreated unconsciously. However, Qin Wushuang's aura approached him step by step. Regardless of how he retreated, it seemed that he could not escape from this abyss. Qin Wei yelled, "Kid, you will regret it if you touch a single hair of ours. I promise." "What do you think you can promise with your current state? Qin Wei, if you bring out your viciousness to deal with the heavenly punishing villa and the sound of thunder sect, I will give you a thumbs up. Even if you do not have the courage, you will not lose the appearance of a disciple of the Qin clan. However, what did you use your courage for? To bully your neighbors? To fight against your own family? Is this your resolve as a disciple of the Qin clan? If that's the case, I don't mind letting you realize it completely today." In his lifetime, Qin Wushuang hated internal strife. He had inherited such mindset from his former world. In his former world, the motherland that he loved deeply was a country that excelled in internal strife and loved internal strife. After reincarnating into this world, he finally experienced the power of unity. It made him like this feeling very much. But this Qin Wei made his happy feeling instantly vanish without a trace. Qin Wei retreated step by step. Gritting his teeth, he called to his 2 brothers, "Let's go together and kill him." At this moment, he could only take the risk. When 3 refined void martial stage warriors fought with all their strength, the power was still terrifying. At least, Qin Yi's expression had changed drastically as he immediately turned around and shouted, "Everyone, retreat 10 miles. Qin Wushuang narrowed his eyes into a line. Currently, in Qin Wushuang's eyes, 3 refined void martial stage warriors were not worth mentioning. For your information, if he were to break through now, he could advance to the profound void martial stage at any moment. And this was under the situation where he had not used the sky-pilfered pill. After Qin Wushuang had swallowed that sky-pilfered pill, he had not refined it. When training inside the ley lines of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, Qin Wushuang did not need the stimulation from the sky-pilfered pill. Instead, he relied on his own comprehension to train to the edge of the profound void martial stage. Coming to the aspiring throne mountain, the second sect Master Qin Yunran's fiery vermilion fruit wine allowed him to reach the peak of the transformation void martial stage. As long as he was willing, he could advance to the profound void martial stage at any time. However, he remembered the teachings of the two supreme headmasters and was in no hurry to break through this thin layer of paper. How could a quasi-profound void stage martial artist fear the joint attack of 3 void refinement stage martial artists? With the rage flood dragon soul in his hand, Xiao Chun casually waved it, and 3 bolts of purple light shot out like bolts of purple lightning. They gave off an aura that made people tremble as they split into 3 and shot out. These 3 purple lightning-like attacks were extremely fast. Their momentum was not something that the 3 guys at the void refining stage could withstand. Halfway through their charge, the 3 of them suddenly felt their bodies tighten, as if they were tied up by an invisible rope. Their bodies twitched, and the more they struggled, the tighter the rope became. Qin Wushuang shook his arm, and the long whip of the rage flood dragon soul flashed out countless whip shadows. When he swung it forward, he had already thrown those 3 high up into the sky and onto the ground. The control of this power was extremely appropriate. This throw had not allowed them to escape, but it also prevented them from falling to their death. Bang, bang, bang! With 3 muffled sounds, the ground was filled with dust. 3 elite warriors at the refined void martial stage, 3 leaders that the Red Water Town was proud of, were thrown to the ground like children that had just learned how to walk. The process and appearance of the fall were extremely embarrassing. With a poof sound, Qin Wei spat out the mud he had sucked into his mouth. When he wiped his mouth, it was full of blood. He appeared to be in a sorry state. He had also lost 3 or 4 of his teeth. The other 2 were not in a better state as they all struggled to get up. Now, those Qin people of the Red Water Town had finally realized what had happened. They walked over quickly and supported the 3 patriarchs. Qin Wei broke free and swore, "You bastard, you did well. If you have the skills, don't leave. Just you wait." Ouch! Before he had finished speaking, Qin Wushuang's fury dragon soul shook casually. At the same time, the bodies of those 3 twitched. As if they had been electrocuted, their entire body flipped and fell to the ground in an embarrassing state. A few times, each time they were about to get up, Qin Wushuang's fury dragon soul shook. That rhythm was simple. However, Qin Wei and the others seemed to be controlled by an invisible rope. No matter how they struggled, they could not break free from this control. After falling a dozen times, they had learned their lesson. They lay on the ground like dead dogs and did not get up. As long as they did not get up, the other party would not throw them down. These 3 leaders of the Red Water Town were acting like scoundrels as they pretended to be dead on the ground. Bao Bao asked with a chuckle, "Boss, should we give them some heavy methods to teach them a lesson?" Qin Wushuang turned around to look at Qin Yi. "Old patriarch, you make the decision." Indeed, Qin Yi hated these 3 sworn enemies of the Red Water Town to the bone. However, after all, he was experienced and prudent. After he had calmed down, he thought far ahead. He said, "These 3 guys bully the weak and fear the strong. However, they do have a strong background. At the aspiring throne mountain, Elder Guan He ranks at least in the top 5 among all the elders. He has great power. He also curried favor with a few honored warriors. He interacted with them at a high level." Qin Wushuang laughed and did not speak a word. He muttered to himself irresolutely, "Old patriarch, do you mean to stop here today? Stop while you're ahead." Now, Qin Yi cared more about the identity of this young man before him. He did not even pay much attention to this mine. Bao Bao and Lone gave a long sigh with regret. They said viciously, "Count yourselves lucky. Remember my boss's words, if you have the skills, use your fists to fight with the sworn enemies of the Qin clan. You are all people of the Qin clan, what kind of skill is it to beat your own people? Lone also joined in the fun. Boss, what is the saying, you cannot write 2 Qin characters with 1 stroke, is that right? Qin Wushuang said with a smile. That's how it is said. Regardless of how tough Qin Wei's bones were, before Qin Wushuang's power, he would not dare to act swift and fierce. He stood up with his head tucked back, and led all the disciples of the Redwater Qin clan to cover their heads and flee like rat. Inwardly, they already hated the Plainfield Qin clan to the extreme. Inwardly, they made a ruthless vow that when Elder Guan He arrived, they would make the Plainfield Qin clan pay 10 times the price. While the people of the Redwater town were fleeing, the people of the Plainfield Qin clan were cheering and jumping for joy. Clearly, they had never expected such situation. In fact, these disciples of the Plainfield Qin clan were already prepared for a bloody battle. To defend the dignity of the Plainfield Qin clan, they would not hesitate to give up their lives. Now that they could end with such a dreamy result, of course they were overjoyed at this unexpected turn of events. Each of them gathered and looked at Qin Wushuang with eyes full of doubt and admiration. Qin Yi's mood was also not much better. At this moment, he could not control the excitement inside his heart. He scrutinized Qin Wushuang's face and caressed that hegemon-breaking formation spear with emotion. Unconsciously, his eyes were filled with tears. After a few hundred years, he had seen the hegemon-breaking formation spear countless times in his dreams. At this moment it had truly appeared. Forefather. When the people of the Plainfield Qin clan saw their forefather losing his self-control, their hearts tightened as they all came to comfort him. I'm fine. Qin Yi waved his hand and used his sleeve to wipe his muddy, tearful eyes. He laughed with tears mixed with laughter. I'm really fine. Among you guys, do any of you recognize this spear? All the people of the Plainfield Qin clan shook their heads. Qin Yi gave a long sigh. No wonder you guys don't recognize it. It's because I never told you guys. I also never allowed you to discuss these matters in the clan. In these few hundred years, generation after generation, you guys are all extremely curious about the ancestors of the Plainfield Qin clan, my 2 older brothers. Am I right? Those clansmen all nodded. Qin Yi looked at the hegemon-breaking formation spear with deep affection and said in a low voice, Then I will tell you now, this hegemon-breaking formation spear is the famous weapon my second brother used to gallop on the battlefield. It is also the best helper for him to sweep away all enemies. The hegemon-breaking formation spear. Qin Wushuang also felt apprehensive. The words of forefather Qin Wushuang seemed to have stirred up his endless worries. It was as if all the hope that ancestor Qin Yu had placed on his descendants had been revived by Qin Wushuang's emotions. Young man, tell me, who is my brother Qin Yu to you? I know that you must be closely related to him. I even saw my second brother's heroic spirit from that year on you. Bao Bao laughed. Forefather, your second brother is the ancestor of my boss. Could it be that you guys have never heard of my boss's name at the Plainfield town? Ancestor? Qin Yi was stunned, then he was overjoyed. You are the descendant of my second brother? Second brother has the inheritance of the family? This is great. This is really great. When Qin Yi said here, he almost lost his voice and his eyes were filled with tears of joy. He grabbed Qin Wushuang's shoulder tightly and looked at him carefully as if he was afraid of missing any part. Forefather, we should not stay here for long, let's find a place to talk in detail. Qin Yi was overjoyed as he laughed. Yes, I am so happy that I am confused. Let's go, let's return to the clan and talk at the Silver Moon Lake. Young man, what is your name? I am Qin Wushuang. Good, it's a great name. No wonder you are the descendant of my second brother. Wushuang, you must take a look at the Silver Moon Lake. That is the place where your ancestor became famous, the place where he walked out. In the past, our Plainfield Chin clan was also a place that everyone in the surrounding counties yearned for. From Chin Yi's tone, when he mentioned the glory of the past, there were still some traces of arrogance. Bao Bao laughed. We already went there once. Your gatekeeper told us, and we learned that the entire Plainfield Chin clan is here. Or else, how would my boss know you guys are here? Overjoyed, Chin Yi grabbed Qin Wushuang's hand and held it tightly as if he was afraid that this dreamlike young man would fly away suddenly. No one could understand the feelings of forefather Qin Wushuang better than him. Qin Wushuang had fully experienced this kind of desire to revitalize the family and for the family to soar. Qin Wushuang had fully experienced it from his father, Qin Lianshan. Initially, when he had stood out at the River County Martial Arts student exam, the joy that flashed in his father's eyes was almost the same as forefather Qin Yi's. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. More chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 578. Instantly, the manor beside the Silver Moon Lake became lively. The clansmen of the Plainfield Chin clan could not wait to spread this good news. It caused those busybodies who admired the history of the Plainfield Chin clan to want to see how the descendants of Senior Chin Yu looked like. However, the Plainfield Chin clan that had never set up much defense against their own townspeople were prepared for battle. They blocked all the busybodies outside the Silver Moon Lake. Inside the manor, Qin Yi brought Qin Wushuang to pay respects to the ancestral hall. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was deeply moved. The structure of this ancestral hall was almost the same as the Eastwood Chin clan. It was apparent that when ancestor Qin Yu had set up the ancestral hall, he had thought of the Plainfield Chin clan and this place where he had become famous. This Plainfield town was not well informed. Although they had heard about Qin Wushuang's reputation, there were too many disciples of the Qin clan in the world, and they did not pay much attention to it. For Qin Wushuang's latest situation, such as the great battle with the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, of course a small place like the Plainfield town would not know about it. These were secrets that only the higher-ups of the aspiring Throne Mountain would know. Before the outside world had spread the news, the aspiring Throne Mountain would not publicize it on a large scale. This was also a form of protection for the young people. Since the Plainfield town did not know, of course the Redwater town would not know. Elder Guan he knew about it. However, he was not at the Upright Morality Hall and had not seen Qin Wushuang. He could not match him to Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang took a tour around the manor. When he talked about ancestor Qin Yu going to the human countries to develop, Qin Yi was also deeply moved. I only knew that second brother was disheartened and had quietly retired. I didn't expect that he had used the human countries as a base. Ha ha, the heavens do not disappoint the faithful. Wushuang, you have inherited second brother's dying wish and are the greatest hope for the Plainfield Chin clan to rise again. Qin Wushuang laughed. Forefather, there is no need to say this. Since we come from the same bloodline, of course we should love each other. However, since the Qin clan is able to occupy the position of the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates, little rascals like Qin Wei are rare. Personally, I feel that for such internal strife, we should not overdo it. That may be the case, but that Qin Wei has always been arrogant and overbearing. He will surely not let the matter rest. If that Elder Guan he were to fuss about it, then this matter would really be difficult to handle. Wushuang, how about you return to the aspiring Throne Mountain first? For the matter here, we will shoulder it. Even if they want to take revenge, we will endure the humiliation and shoulder it. As long as you can stand out in the future, the Plainfield Chin clan will not be afraid of not seeing the light of day. From his tone, one could tell that Qin Yi was extremely afraid of Elder Guan he. It was so much so that there was a bone-deep fear. After all, to the little Plainfield Chin clan, An elder holding a high position in the headquarters was a giant figure. It was normal for Qin Yi to have such worries. However, Qin Wushuang had experienced so much, and his state of mind was very stable. He did not believe that since that Guan he could become an elder, could he be as brainless as Qin Wei? Completely unprincipled? Qin Wushuang would not be afraid of him if he was really so indiscriminately protective. Regardless of talking reason or competing with fists, Qin Wushuang would not be afraid to keep him company. When he had just arrived at the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, he did not want to cause trouble. However, it did not mean that he was afraid of trouble. Not wanting to cause trouble was a form of awareness of a lofty position. However, if someone had to climb on top of his head and tried to step on him, Qin Wushuang's lofty and unyielding character had never been intimidated by power. Even during the most difficult times, he had never considered lowering his head. As he had said, if he must say what kind of support he had, it would be his lofty and unyielding character that had been passed down from generation to generation. It was a surge of hot-blooded righteousness. For this pair of iron fists, even if it were the greatest injustice, they would flatten him. When Qin Yi saw Qin Wushuang smiling and not speaking a word, he thought that since he had just arrived at the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, he did not understand the depth of the waters at the headquarters. He advised him patiently, "Wushuang, that elder Guan he." Bao Bao raised the corner of his mouth and interrupted Qin Yi with a smile. "Forefather, don't worry. For this matter, don't worry, my boss will take care of it. If that elder Guan he is reasonable, then it would be the best. When we have defined the border of that mine, everyone will pass it with a smile. If he is not reasonable, we will not be afraid of him." Elder Guan Feng also said that if we encounter any problems, we can find him. Elder Guan Feng? Qin Yi was stunned. Is that the Elder Guan Feng who had the best relationship with senior and second brother? That's him. Qin Yi was half joyful and half worried. If Elder Guan Feng is willing to step out, this matter can be discussed. However, in these few hundred years, I have never seen Elder Guan Feng come to the plain field town. Qin Wushuang laughed. "Forefather, even if Elder Guan Feng does not step out, there is nothing to be afraid of. I have been to the headquarters of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. I feel that the Qin clan is not a place without reason. Even with Elder Guan he's power and influence, he cannot reach the sky with one hand." That's what you say. However, in the future when you are developing at the aspiring throne mountain, you would not be able to take it if he were to make things difficult for you. Don't you know? Initially, Guan he was jealous of your ancestor Qin Yu. Later, when your ancestor Qin Yu suffered internal injuries in a duel, this Guan he was the first vanguard who took joy in other people's misfortune. So there are these illusions, no wonder. Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly. Qin Yi still wanted to say something, yet Bao Bao shouted, "I say, forefather, you are still not reassured by my boss. I am not afraid to tell you that even though Elder Guan he is strong, he is not much stronger than my boss. My boss still has many trump cards. Even if that Guan he were to come, he would not be afraid of him. Besides, in terms of backing, while Guan he can rely on honored warriors, my boss has the protection of the chief." Protection of the chief? Qin Yi was dumbstruck as he looked at Qin Wushuang with astonishment. Clearly, he thought this was Bao Bao's joking word. "You don't believe me?" Bao Bao laughed. "My boss was received by the third chief at the aspiring throne mountain. Before he departed from the aspiring throne mountain to come here, he even drank wine at the second chief's place. That Guan he thinks he is infallible. Ask him if he is qualified to let the second chief invite him to drink a cup of fire vermilion fruit wine?" Qin Yi opened his mouth and his expression was already somewhat dumbstruck. To him, everything Bao Bao had said sounded more like a storytelling story. However, his rationality told him that it did not seem like a story from a storytelling story. At least, from the expression of this young man, there was no exaggeration. Could it be that everything was true? Just when he was thinking about how to ask for clarification, suddenly, a disciple bumped into the door and said in a panic, "Forefather, people from the Red Water town are here." Qin Yi's expression changed as he asked with astonishment, "How many people have come?" "I am afraid there are a few hundred of them, all of them are first-rate." Qin Yi's expression was indeterminate as he mumbled, "It must be Elder Guan He. Did you see him?" "I didn't see him, but there are two unfamiliar faces. I am afraid they are the disciples of Elder Guan He at the aspiring throne mountain." Qin Yi could not help but rub his hands. Inwardly, he was incredibly anxious. In the end, he still asked Qin Wushuang with determination, "Wushuang, go quickly, we will hold them off here." As soon as he had finished speaking, Qin Wushuang had already walked out the door. "Forefather, counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. Although the heavenly Emperor Qin clan is big, we cannot hide." After Qin Wushuang had finished speaking, he had already arrived at the entrance of the manor. Now that Qin Wei had already bandaged his wounds. When he saw Qin Wushuang, his expression changed drastically as he said to the two people next to him, "Two senior brothers, it's this kid, it's him." These two were all elite warriors at the transformation void martial stage. Although they stared at Qin Wushuang from afar, they did not dare to neglect him. Qin Wushuang seemed to turn a blind eye to these layers of encirclement as he asked with a clear voice, "Where is Elder Guan He? Since you are here, why don't you come out for a chat?" Qin Wei mocked and ridiculed, "Kid, it's not too late for you to be rampant after you have passed the two senior brothers. Just you, what qualifications do you have to ask to see Elder Guan He?" Qin Wushuang did not pay attention to Qin Wei as he only said lightly, "Elder Guan He, I know you are already here. For today's matter, should I use my mouth or some other method, please tell me." Qin Wushuang's calm and collected shrewdness had made Guan He, who was observing in the dark, somewhat surprised. Inwardly, he was awed. Since when did the Plainfield Qin clan have such an exceptional young man? Since this Guan He had arrived in a hurry, he had not figured out the sequence of events. Thus, he was not in a rush to show himself. However, since Qin Wushuang had exposed his whereabouts, if he did not show himself, it would appear that he was not open and candid. Instantly, with a flash, he appeared at the entrance of the manor. As soon as the lights were withdrawn, Elder Guan He appeared to be dressed in a long robe of alternating red and white like the color of a lotus flower. "Young man, what is your relationship with the Plainfield Qin clan?" Naturally, Guan He's eyesight was incomparable to that Qin Wei. As soon as he saw Qin Wushuang, he knew that this young man was exceptional. Being at the perfect void martial stage, although Elder Guan He was not worried, inwardly, he was somewhat shocked when he saw such a young man full of potential. "Elder Guan He, since you don't know who I am, then there is no need to ask. Since everyone is in a daze, it would not be too late to discuss other matters after we have explained the reason. If we can reach an agreement, I will be the host and invite you for a drink. Everyone will laugh and forget the grudges. Since we are all disciples of the Qin clan, it should be like this, right?" Qin Wushuang's words were beautiful as he threw the hot potato to Guan He. Of course, Guan He would not be provoked by a young man. A trace of a ruthless smile emerged from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of domineering aura. "Young man, although you're trying your best to put yourself on the same level as me, do you really think that this old man will agree with you when you're doing this deliberately? Among the Qin clan, many people are qualified to invite me for a drink. Clearly, you are not one of them." Indeed, Elder Guan He's words were somewhat unreasonable. Qin Wushuang had already experienced some of it. Yet, he did not mind as he laughed without batting an eyelid. "If that's the case, then please draw another path. I am not afraid of you if you want to fight. Regardless of the path, I will accompany you to the end." Qin Wushuang's implied meaning was this. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 579. This was Qin Wushuang's personality. If you respect me, I will respect you 10 times over. If you do not want the face I gave you, then do not blame me for turning hostile. Gradually, Guan He's gaze became cold and ruthless. The domineering aura from his eyes had congealed into a form of invasion. Vividly, he had formed a wave of invisible aura and started to pressure Qin Wushuang. In terms of strength and stage, Qin Wushuang was indeed inferior to Elder Guan He, who was at the perfect void martial stage. In terms of aura, Qin Wushuang had gone through the baptism of the Supreme Tao. How could he be suppressed by the aura of someone at the perfect void martial stage? He said with composure, Elder Guan He, if you want to subdue me without a fight, this idea is too naive. The opponents I once met were 10 times stronger than you, and they had never used their aura to make me yield. Like a sharp blade, these light words had pierced into the heart of Elder Guan He. Instantly, it had reduced half of his aura. Although Elder Guan He was tyrannical and domineering, he was not a brainless person. When he saw that Qin Wushuang remained calm under his aura, he was already somewhat suspicious. Inwardly, he whispered, just who was this young man? When had such a young man appeared at the aspiring throne mountain? Whose disciple was he? Although Elder Guan He had spent most of his time on the outside, he was confident that he had grasped most of the matters within the sect. Especially those elite warriors of the younger generation, he knew them like the back of his hand. However, such a strange kid had shattered Elder Guan He's self-confidence. It was not because he felt that he could not take care of this young man, but because he feared which higher-up was behind this young man. Before he had figured out this problem, it would be impossible for him to make a heavy move. Although Elder Guan He had great power, at the aspiring throne mountain, he still had to look at the faces of many people. After all, there were too many people with greater power than him at the aspiring throne mountain. Young man, if this old man were to really strike, do you think that you or the 2 helpers beside you would be able to handle it? Qin Wushuang said leisurely. This way, Elder Guan He is not very confident. Or else, with your strength at the perfect void martial stage, you could have made a move as soon as you entered the door. Who can stop you? These words were obviously directed at Elder Guan He's inner heart, pulling out the worry and fear in his heart. Elder Guan He was in awe, secretly thinking that this young man was indeed remarkable. But the more Qin Wushuang acted like this, the more he felt that Qin Wushuang had a trump card behind him. Qin Wushuang seemed to know what was on his mind. He smiled and said in a carefree manner, Earlier, I told Qin Wei that I am all alone. I have only been at the aspiring throne mountain for a few days. He had no teacher and no backing. He only has a body of steel and a heart of righteousness. You have a sharp tongue. Guan He coldly snorted. Brat, if you have a sect backing you, you better say it. Otherwise, once you make a move, this old man will not know what is called politeness. At this moment, Bao Bao interrupted. Why do you keep asking? I'm afraid that if I tell you, you won't have the guts to compete. Guan He laughed out of extreme anger. Then I would like to hear what kind of major backing you have to make me lose the guts to compete. Bao Bao laughed. What big backing do I need? Didn't my boss say it? He has only been at the aspiring throne mountain for a few days. Is it important to have a teacher or backing? Indeed, this made Guan He feel embarrassed. Lone also said coldly, Elder Guan He, my boss has no backing. If you are going to make a move, feel free to come. I would like to see if you, Elder Guan He, or that Heavenly Luo Daoist sect is more powerful. Heavenly Luo Daoist sect? With a buzzing sound inside Elder Guan He's head, he suddenly remembered something. Then, He remembered that, in these days, some of his old friends at the Upright Morality Hall had told him some stories. Instantly, his expression froze and the way he looked at Qin Wuxuang had also changed. This change of events caused people from both the Plainfield town and the Red Water town to feel extremely astonished. You are that Qin Wuxuang from the human countries? Inwardly, Guan He scolded himself for being stupid. He should have thought of it earlier. He had also heard about the matter at the Sacrificial Valley. Others might not know about Qin Yu's background, but being an old neighbor, how could he not know? In fact, he should have thought that this young man was Qin Wuxuang. Qin Wuxuang smiled lightly. Yes. The complexion of Elder Guan He had turned green. This time, he truly felt that he had acted too recklessly. Regardless, he had displayed such imposing manner. If he had not done anything, how would these Qin clansmen of the Red Water town look at him? However, who was this Qin Wuxuang? He was the young demonic genius that the third chief had brought back from the heavenly Luo Daoist sect and had almost destroyed the sect with one hand. Regardless of Elder Guan He's courage, certainly he would not dare to use force against Qin Wuxuang. He could not win or lose. In the end, he would lose and there would be no other possibilities. Just from Qin Wuxuang's contribution of destroying the foundation of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, it was enough to surpass Elder Guan He. Not to mention, this kid was only a little over 20 years old and had full potential. From the recent news, clearly they were preparing to nurture Qin Wuxuang as a core disciple. For sure, such a young man would surpass him, an elder, in the future. Not to mention the successor to the chief, at least, he would be the successor to the honored warrior level. When he thought here, instantly, Elder Guan He's overbearing temperament became much softer. Qin Wei had suffered at the hands of Qin Wuxuang as he cried out, Elder Guan He, this kid is only a poor kid from the human countries. He is a nouveau riche and does not have any backing. At this moment, Elder Guan He even had the thought of pinching Qin Wei to death. Qin Wuxuang still appeared to be at ease as he said lightly, Elder Guan He, it seems that this patriarch Qin Wei did not learn his lesson. It's not that I am being arrogant. If all disciples of the Qin clan were like this Qin Wei, my heavenly Emperor Qin clan would have already been kicked out of the heavenly Emperor mountain. Qin Wei's complexion alternated between green and white as he swore. Kid, don't always act like a hypocrite. If you are so noble, why don't you bury yourself in the Sacrificial Valley? As soon as he spoke these words, not to mention Qin Wuxuang, even the complexion of Elder Guan He had changed. He flicked his sleeve and shouted, Qin Wei, shut up! Swept by this strong wind, Qin Wei staggered a few steps back and kept coughing. He looked at Elder Guan He with astonishment. Clearly, he did not believe that someone as protective as Elder Guan He would publicly lecture his trusted subordinate in such situation. Clearly, the other people of the Red Water town could not accept this scene. They looked at Elder Guan He, who was emitting an awe-inspiring aura, with a stupefied expression. Trembling with fear, they did not know what to do. Elder Guan He gave a long sigh and nodded. Qin Wuxuang, I take back my words. I must admit that you are qualified to treat me to a drink. I am afraid this is also the best way to solve this problem. After he had finished speaking these words, Guan He seemed to have aged 10 years. To admit defeat before a 20-years-old young man, this was something he had never experienced in his lifetime. However, the situation was more important than everything. Who asked him to be reckless? Who asked him to not investigate beforehand? Originally, this matter could have ended with dignity and harmony. Why would he be forced to reconcile and slap his own face? Each of the people of the Red Water town was dumbstruck and found it hard to believe. On the other hand, each of the people of the Plainfield town was in ecstasy as they cheered in high spirit. To the people of the Plainfield Qin clan, the arrival of Elder Guan He was simply a legendary existence. Each of them had a feeling that a calamity had arrived. Who would have thought that before this elder Guan he had made a move? He had reached a compromise with a young man from the human countries with just a few words. Could it be that ancestor Qin Yu's name was still so useful after a few hundred years? Even a descendant of his could make elder Guan he restrain his fear? But no matter what, this was a pleasant surprise. Qin Wushuang chuckled. Good, elder Guan He, you are a straightforward person, I admire you very much. In my opinion, to solve this matter this way, it is the most perfect result. Elder Guan He, let's exchange wine cups at the table, it's better than fighting with each other here. When people of the Qin clan kill each other, even if there is a reason behind it, for sure we will become the biggest joke of our enemies. These words made sense. Although elder Guan He had been suppressing the plain field town internally, he did not wish for another exceptional disciple to emerge from the plain field town and suppress the feng shui of the red water town. However, to the outside world, Guan He's desire to win was not any weaker than Qin Wushuang. He nodded with a roaring laugh. That's right, we cannot let the outside world laugh at the internal conflict of the Qin clan. Qin Wushuang, earlier I wanted to break you into 8 pieces. Now, I suddenly feel that you are somewhat interesting. No wonder the few chiefs and those honored warriors spoke highly of you. It seems that beneath your great reputation, you cannot live up to it. Guan He also wanted to find a way out for himself. He turned around and shouted at Qin Wei. Qin Wei, come here, apologize to young Master Wushuang. Qin Wei could not believe his ears. What was going on with elder Guan He? All of you listen well, in the future, whoever sees young Master Wushuang, you must show some respect. If young Master Wushuang had not shown mercy, even if he had killed you, I would not have sought justice for you. You only know that young Master Wushuang came from the human countries. Do you know what he has been doing recently? Have you heard about the heavenly Luo Daoist sect? It was this young Master Wushuang who single-handedly destroyed their mountain gate. This matter has already shocked the entire Xian Yuan mound. You short-sighted people, why are you not thanking young Master Wushuang for not killing you? The more Guan He praised Qin Wushuang, the easier it was to accept his change of attitude from arrogance to deference. Besides, he was not overly praising him, he was only stating a fact. When Qin Wei and the others heard these words, they realized how stupid they were. Even the supreme Dao elite warriors of the heavenly Emperor Qin clan appreciated him. Was he someone they could afford to offend? People of the Red Water Qin clan were too ashamed to show their face. For the people of the plain field town, now they knew the significance of the name Qin Wushuang. Each of them was beaming with smiles as they felt happiness from the bottom of their heart. After such a long time, the plain field Qin clan finally enjoyed true respect. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. More chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 580. Due to Elder Guan He's tactfulness, the following matters appeared to be abnormally smooth. Those few leaders of the Red Water town did not have the right to speak. They could only drink to drown their sorrows. As they watched the people of the plain field town in high spirits, as if they were celebrating a festival, Qin Wei and the others realized with sorrow that the superiority of the Red Water town over the plain field town for the past few hundred years was about to end. Thinking of this, they felt a sense of loss in their hearts. However, seeing how elder he was so respectful to this young man, it was as if after turning from an enemy to a friend, they had instantly become incomparably close comrades in arms. This situation made them feel a sense of helplessness and frustration. Regarding the border issue between the two towns, Elder Guan He acted out of character and used a negotiating tone to ask for Qin Wushuang's opinion. Qin Wushuang looked at Qin Yi and asked, "Forefather, for this mine, how do you think would be the most ideal distribution?" Qin Yi was not a person that was blindly aggressive. He also knew the principle of stopping while he was ahead. Although Elder Guan he was courteous, from the current situation, this Elder Guan he was restraining his fear of Wu Shuang's potential and reputation. It would not be appropriate for him to be overly flamboyant. At the moment, he said, according to the historical division of the border, the plain field town would take at least 80%. At most, the red water town would take 20%. However, in these years, the usual practice is to divide the mining rights equally. Everyone is from the Qin clan. It would be unreasonable for us to quarrel over these matters. Let's follow the usual practice and still split 50-50, how about it? Qin Wushuang looked at Elder Guan He. Initially, Elder Guan He thought Qin Yi would demand an exorbitant price and ask for 80% of the territory. Upon hearing Qin Yi's words, splitting 50-50 and maintaining the usual practice was out of his expectation. However, since the other party had lowered his stance, Elder Guan He also knew that if he did not stop while he was ahead, most likely it would not make sense. It's rare for Patriarch Qin Yi to be so generous, then let's do as you say. Both sides will sign an agreement today with evidence to prevent unnecessary disputes in the future. Upon hearing Elder Guan He's words, Qin Wushuang inwardly cursed this cunning old fox. It sounded like Elder Guan He was considering the weak plain field town, but in fact, Qin Wushuang knew that Elder Guan He was worried that he, Qin Wushuang, would become strong in the future, and would once again turn hostile and go back on his words. Everything was settled in advance. Even if Qin Wushuang became strong in the future, with the agreement in hand, it would be justifiable no matter where he went. However, Qin Wushuang didn't want to dwell on these small details, and his eyes shouldn't stay on this small mine. Since Qin Yi felt that it wasn't a problem to split the loot 50-50, there was no need for him to continue being entangled. After the deal was finalized, the farce that had evolved into a life-and-death battle ended happily. After Elder Guan He left with the people of the Redwater town, the joy that had been suppressed for a long time on the side of the plain field town finally broke out. Those children of the plain field town looked at Qin Wushuang with an expression that could not be described with the word worship. The meddlesome people of the plain field town flocked over and wanted to see Qin Wushuang's graceful bearing. However, Qin Wushuang went to find Qin Yi alone. Inwardly, he still had some questions and wanted to ask. When Qin Yi saw that Qin Wushuang was extremely serious, he asked, "Wushuang, what's the matter?" Qin Wushuang asked, "Forefather, when I was in the human countries, the line of the Qin clan had experienced a few population losses. I heard that all the able-bodied men were transferred. They should have all come to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. Have you heard about this matter?" Qin Yi was somewhat at a loss as he shook his head. Is there such a thing? Ever since second brother went missing, there was no more news from the plain field town. Qin Wushuang was somewhat disappointed. It seemed that forefather Qin Yi should not know about those missing people. Normally, the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan rules the Qin clan in the world. It's normal for them to transfer people. However, the human countries are so remote, they should not have gone there to transfer people, right? Besides, does anyone at the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan know that second brother had wandered to the human countries? Qin Yi's words made Qin Wushuang feel even more confused. However, he decided to not think about these matters for now. He would ask the third chief when he had the chance in the future. After staying at the plain field Qin clan for 2 days, Qin Wushuang observed the life of this plain field Qin clan. It was incredibly peaceful and completely different than the aspiring Throne Mountain Qin clan. Inwardly he thought, this plain field town is a place to live. If the situation at the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan was not so chaotic, this plain field town would be a suitable place to live. I see that father has an urgent desire to return to his ancestral home. If there is a chance in the future, it would be nice for the family to live at this plain field town. As Qin Wushuang thought this way, he told Qin Yi his thoughts. Of course Qin Yi welcomed him as he laughed. Wushuang, if your father is willing to return to the plain field town, I promise that he will be welcomed with open arms. Qin Yi also knew how to think. Now, the line of the plain field town had been suppressed for a few hundred years. Finally, they had the chance to hold their heads up high. However, all this hope was tied to Qin Wushuang. How much effort this Qin Wushuang was willing to put in for the plain field Qin clan completely depended on how much affection Qin Wushuang had for the plain field Qin clan. If one were to only look at the relationship of bloodline to Qin Wushuang's generation, a dozen or 20 generations had passed. In fact, the bloodline had become thinner. However, if Qin Wushuang's father was willing to return to the plain field town, it would be a different story. He believed that by that time, Qin Wushuang would certainly devote himself to the plain field town. With this consideration, of course Qin Yi would welcome him with both hands. Under Qin Yi and all the clansmen of the plain field Qin clan, Qin Wushuang and his group left the plain field town and returned to the aspiring throne mountain. When he returned to the ascending dragon slope, Qin Wushuang discovered that the number of core disciples staying at the ascending dragon slope had increased significantly compared to a few days ago. At the ascending dragon slope, from time to time, he could see core disciples rushing back from the outside. Although the core disciples did not meet much in ordinary times, they all knew each other. When they saw Qin Wushuang's unfamiliar face, they all felt somewhat strange. A few of them even greeted Qin Wushuang. "Are you new?" The one who asked this question was one of Qin Wushuang's neighbors. This core disciple had a tall and lofty figure. Although he was only at the transformation void martial stage, it was apparent that this person was not old. Qin Wushuang nodded with a smile. "I've only been here for a few days." "Then you must call me senior brother. Haha, it's best to enter first. I am Qin Lan, what about you?" That person extended his hand in a friendly manner. Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang shook hands with that Qin Lan. Both parties smiled lightly and appeared to have a mutual understanding. Qin Wushuang? When Qin Lan heard this name, he was slightly stunned. "Recently, I heard that there is a young man from the human countries called Qin Wushuang. Could it be you?" "Indeed, I am the only one called Qin Wushuang in the human countries." Qin Wushuang smiled. "Haha, it's really you. When I returned to the mountain this time, it seemed that everyone was talking about you. They said that you had done something extraordinary. In the end, what did you do? Tell me about it." Although this Qin Lan had a tall and lofty figure, his movements still appeared somewhat childish. Qin Wushuang knew that everything he had done now was only known to those higher-ups at the elder level. Although the core disciples held the same position as the elders, clearly, those who were behind in the news had not received the information. "In fact, it's nothing, I just fought a few battles with the heavenly Luo Daoist sect." Qin Wushuang laughed and asked, "Brother Qin Lan, how many years have you lived at the ascending dragon slope?" Qin Lan gave a free and easy smile. "I am only half a year earlier than you. Most likely, before you moved in, I was the last one. You came from the human countries, and I came from the Qin branch of the Heavenly One Prefecture. Haha, in fact, we are all legitimate disciples of the Qin clan at the foot of the aspiring throne mountain. The Qin clan under the heavens is one family. Isn't it the same whether you are born at the foot of the aspiring throne mountain?" Qin Lan said with a bitter smile. "Whether it's the same or not, you will soon experience it. Perhaps in the eyes of the higher-ups, the core disciples hold the same value. However, to many of the core disciples born with good backgrounds, they still have a sense of superiority deep in their bones. Only, fortunately, most of the core disciples are not that bored." From Qin Lan's tone, clearly, he had suffered such a loss. Qin Wushuang only laughed and did not pursue the matter. He did not want to inquire about these matters when he had just arrived. When he had come to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, he had never thought about competing with people of the Qin clan. When Qin Lan saw Qin Wushuang smiling without speaking a word, he patted Qin Wushuang's shoulder. Junior brother, regardless if you encounter any injustice, you must remember my advice. Bear with it for a while and the wind will be calm and the waves will be calm. Take a step back and you will have a boundless sea and sky. After he had finished speaking, this Qin Lan walked away leisurely. From his pretentious mature tone, this Qin Lan should have suffered some hardships. Qin Wushuang shook his head with a bitter smile and walked into the courtyard. On the other hand, after Elder Guan he had left the Red Water Town, he returned to the aspiring Throne Mountain with a heavy heart. At the Plain Field Town, he worked hard to control his emotions and did not choose to fight with Qin Wushuang. It was because he had heard about Qin Wushuang's methods and did not want to put himself in a difficult position. In fact, Elder Guan he had lived for a few hundred years and was never a kind person. He had retreated in order to advance because he feared the reputation left behind by Qin Wushuang after the great battle with the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. He was afraid that his lifetime of wisdom would be destroyed overnight. This time, he had returned to the aspiring Throne Mountain for Qin Wushuang's matter. After he had returned to the aspiring Throne Mountain, Elder Guan he went to visit a person immediately. This person held a much higher position than Elder Guan he at the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. He was honored warrior Ji Huai, one of the top 12 honored warriors of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. In terms of age, this Ji Huai was similar to Guan He and was part of the same group. Only Ji Huai's strength and talent were higher than Elder Guan He. Thus, up to this point, he held a higher position than Guan He. When honored warrior Ji Huai heard that Elder Guan He had come to visit, he had guessed most of it. He let his trusted subordinates lead Elder Guan He to a secret place. When these two old friends and best friends met, they had an incredibly complicated mood. Clearly, each of them knew what the other was thinking. "You have returned to the Red Water Town?" Ji Huai asked straightforwardly. Guan He also did not hold back as he nodded. "Yes." "That Qin Wushuang has also returned to the Plain Field Town?" Guan He gave a long sigh. "Yes, in the end he has returned. I really didn't expect it. Honored warrior, could you have imagined that today's situation would occur?" Honored warrior Ji Huai said lightly with an expressionless face. "Regardless of whether I had imagined it or not, the situation has developed to this point and it is not the worst. At least, I did not see the intention to uncover old grudges from that Qin Wushuang." Elder Guan he gave a long sigh. "This Qin Wushuang is young, yet he is shrewd. Who knows what he is thinking?" While he was speaking, suddenly, Elder Ji Huai moved his spiritual perception and took out the communication jade plate. Almost at the same time, Guan He also had the same reaction. "It's the chief who has gathered everyone." Honored warrior Ji Huai and Elder Guan he did not dare to neglect as they rushed towards the upright morality hall. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. More chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 581. Clearly, the core disciples had also received these summoning orders as they all rushed towards the upright morality hall. Qin Lan walked before Qin Wushuang's courtyard with a smile and called out, "Junior brother, let's go to the upright morality hall. Didn't you receive the notice?" Qin Wushuang was stunned. "Go to the upright morality hall? You didn't receive the communication spiritual talisman from the chief?" Qin Lan was stunned. Now, Qin Wushuang remembered that his identity as a core disciple had not been approved. Of course, he would not be able to talk about this communication spiritual talisman. He touched his nose with a bitter smile, and just when he was about to let Qin Lan go ahead, suddenly Elder Guan Chi's figure dropped down from the slope. He walked over in large strides. "Wushuang, I was worried that you had not returned. The chief has issued the summoning spiritual talisman, and all Qin clansmen above the core disciple level are to rush over. Elder Guanqi? Qin Lan looked at Elder Guanqi with some astonishment. He seemed to have never expected that Elder Guanqi would come to the ascending dragon slope. Elder Guanqi said with a smile, Qin Lan, stay close to Wushuang, you must take care of each other in the future. Qin Lan laughed. Of course, didn't I invite him to go to the Upright Morality Hall? Wushuang, let's go, the chief is waiting for you. Now, Qin Wushuang knew that he also had a part to play. He nodded and went with Guanqi and the others. When they arrived at the Upright Morality Hall, many core disciples had already arrived. Besides a small portion that could not make it back in time, almost everyone had arrived. This time, the group was strangely gigantic. All 12 honored warriors had arrived. There were hundreds of elders and 200 or 300 core disciples. These few hundred people formed the core layer of the aspiring Throne Mountain Qin clan headquarters. They were the elite at the top of the pyramid. As for the guardians below them, they were not even qualified to step into the Upright Morality Hall. Guanqi arranged Qin Wushuang with the core disciple group and returned to his elder group. Guanfeng was also with the elder group. When he saw Qin Wushuang coming in, he smiled at him and nodded. Then, he shot a glance at Elder Guanhe unconsciously. Both of them looked at each other meaningfully. Although Qin Wushuang knew that there was a story here, his face was calm and he pretended that he didn't see anything fishy. Elder Guanqi seemed to be the steward of the Upright Morality Hall. After waiting for the last few people to arrive, Guanqi counted the heads, walked to the center, and said loudly, Everyone, almost everyone is here. The 2 sect masters were about to arrive. Everyone, please be quiet. Elder Guanqi had just finished speaking when Qin Yunran's hearty voice came from outside the Upright Morality Hall. Haha, I haven't been back to the Upright Morality Hall for a while. It seems that everyone is full of energy. Not bad, not bad. The 2 big shots, Qin Yunran and Qin Chongyang, walked in together. Even though the 2 Supreme Dao experts had completely suppressed their Supreme Dao aura, their combined aura was enough to clear the area. All the people who had been whispering to each other stopped talking and watched the 2 sect masters walk up to the sect master's throne. After they were seated, Qin Yunran waved his hand. Everyone, please sit down. Don't be shy. Only then did everyone sit down. As soon as Qin Chongyang walked in, he had been frowning slightly. He stood up and said, Everyone, this time I have called you all here because firstly, there is a matter that requires everyone to vote on. Secondly, I want to report some recent important movements of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. Qin Chongyang spoke concisely and comprehensively. He looked at Qin Wushuang and waved his hand. Wushuang, come out. Qin Wushuang walked up. Wushuang, since you are new here, many of our colleagues don't know you. Today, we can use this opportunity to get to know each other. Qin Wushuang cupped his hands in a salute. Those with higher seniority all nodded to acknowledge him. Those of the same generation cupped their hands in return. Qin Chongyang laughed. I am sure many of you know the name of Qin Wushuang. For his past deeds, those who are well informed, most likely you have heard about it. Today, I have called you all here to vote on the matter of awarding Qin Wushuang the title of Core Disciple. If anyone has any suggestions, you can speak up. Our Qin clan will never be a one-man show. Everyone is qualified to express their opinions. As he spoke, he changed the topic to everyone with a smile. Third Chief, I think everyone has the same opinion on this matter. I am afraid most of us would not be able to accomplish what Qin Wushuang has done. Therefore, I fully agree with him becoming a core disciple. Even if he were to be promoted as an honored warrior and be on equal footing with me, I would not object. Haha. The person who spoke these words was honored warrior Zhisong, an elder with a straightforward personality. Honored warrior Zhisong's words had won a lot of agreement. Many core disciples had not received the information in time and started to ask around. After hearing the explanation, each of them drew a breath of cold air when they learned the monstrous things Qin Wushuang had done. They looked at Qin Wushuang with a completely different expression. Third Chief, I think there is no need to ask for any opinions, right? Everyone's opinion is quite unanimous this time. Another venerable Yang Ji also exclaimed. Qin Chongyang laughed. Are there no other opinions? Although Elder Guan he carried a smile on the corner of his mouth. He was looking at honored warrior Ji Huai. Honored warrior Ji Huai gave a light cough. Third Chief, I do have a few words to say. Just say it. After Ji Huai received Qin Chongyang's approval, he said seriously, I have heard about the reputation of Qin Wushuang. And for what he has done, if it is true, it is extremely rare. However, if we were to confer the title of core disciple, according to the ancient tradition, there should be a period of observation. Even if Qin Wushuang's ability is not worthy of suspicion, his background, and his details should be able to withstand the test. Or else, the title of core disciple is a small matter. If something were to happen, it would be a huge blow to the Qin clan. Ji Huai's words caused a few experienced and prudent honored warriors to nod slightly. The other elders also nodded in agreement. Although not many people agreed with Ji Huai, there was a small group. An elder standing next to Guan he also spoke. Honored warrior Ji Huai's words are reasonable. I also feel that everyone should not be controlled by a form of fanatical emotion. According to the original standard of the Qin headquarters to take in core disciples, disciples from the foreign branches need to be inspected for at least 3 years. Some even need 10 or 20 years. After all, the disciples of the branch Qin clan are not under the eyes of the aspiring throne mountain. In terms of their foundation, we are not too clear. Yes, this Qin Wushuang came from the human countries and is even more remote. He has never communicated with the Qin headquarters. It is somewhat abrupt for him to appear all of a sudden. I think it's extremely necessary to inspect him carefully. Qin Wushuang remained silent. Being the person involved, of course it was inconvenient for him to defend himself. Most importantly, he was not extremely passionate about the title of core disciple. At this moment, he was thinking the most about Elder Guanfeng's advice and Qin Lan's words. It seemed that the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan was not as harmonious as it appeared on the surface. Just when Qin Wushuang was about to say something, suddenly Elder Guanfeng stood up and walked next to him. His face was somewhat red and swollen. Honored warrior Ji Huai and elders, if you want to talk about the rules of taking in core disciples, I have nothing to say. But if you want to talk about his background, origin, and foundation, I, Guanfeng, have no choice but to stand out and say something. Qin Wushuang's ancestor, Qin Yu, had the best relationship with me. Heaven and earth can bear witness to Qin Yu's loyalty to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Now, his descendant has returned to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. If you want to talk about his origin and background, it would be somewhat disappointing. Honored warrior Ji Huai said lightly. Of course many people here remember Qin Yu. However, when that Qin Yu left the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, he did not leave openly, right? No one can say clearly where he went and what motive he had for leaving the aspiring throne mountain. Guanfeng's face turned even redder and the blue veins on his forehead were about to burst out. He said angrily, Honored warrior Ji Huai, you hold a higher position than me. It's not that I want to contradict you. Initially, others might not know why Qin Yu left the aspiring throne mountain, but honored warrior Ji Huai should know. How Qin Yu treated the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Touch your conscience and speak. Did the Qin clan betray him, or did Qin Yu betray the Qin clan? This way, you feel that the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan betrayed Qin Yu? Guanfeng said loudly. I only know that disciples of the Qin clan must live up to the Qin clan's strength of character. When speaking, you must live up to your conscience. I do not have great skill, but I do have this bit of conscience. If there is a problem with Qin Yu or Qin Wushuang, I am willing to guarantee with my life. These words were already somewhat angry, and appeared to be quarreling. However, the two chiefs did not stop him, for they were unclear of the reason. They would never stop any voices. A few elders who were close to Guanfeng all walked up and acted as mediators. Elder Guanfeng, it's an old matter that happened a few hundred years ago, no need to mention it, right? Let's not harm the harmony. Guanfeng had an extremely mediocre and honest personality. It was apparent how much anger he had accumulated since he was able to make an honest person like him become angry. Qin Wushuang took a deep breath and said, "Everyone, please allow me to speak. I did not mind the hard work, and came to the heavenly Emperor Qin clan, because I admire the strength of character of the Qin clan. Today, if I were to cause a dispute because of Wushuang's matter, it would not be my intention. For this title of core disciple, I am not determined to get it. In my opinion, as long as I make all contributions to the Qin clan within my ability, some false reputation is insignificant. With my temperament, I am Qin Wushuang. It is not to the extent that I cannot accept the title of core disciple. Please everyone stop quarreling. Time will prove everything, right?" Qin Wushuang's attitude was out of everyone's expectation. Suddenly Qin Yunran, who had not spoken a word, laughed. "Each of you are quarreling until your face and ears turn red. You are not as broad-minded as a young man. All right, let me speak a word. Qin Wushuang's title of core disciple can be delayed for a while. However, as the chief, I will grant him the same authority as a core disciple. He will not be stopped from entering and leaving the upright morality hall and the ascending dragon slope." As soon as he spoke these words, it was the same as giving Qin Wushuang a pass. No one was qualified to doubt that Qin Yunran, the second chief, had this qualification. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. More chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 582. Although Qin Yunran rarely got involved with these worldly affairs of the aspiring throne mountain, everyone knew that it was not because this second chief did not have the qualifications, but because he had already transcended the worldly affairs of the aspiring throne mountain. Now, with his golden mouth, it was the same as concluding this matter. Although honored warrior Ji Huai still felt somewhat awkward inwardly, he would not dare to challenge the authority of the second chief. He shook his head with a bitter smile and did not say anything more. In fact, Qin Chongyang and Qin Yunran, these two major heads, had already thought of various situations beforehand. Therefore, they had also discussed it. Once different kinds of strange voices appeared, Qin Yunran would step out to make the final decision and eliminate all doubtful voices. It was not because Qin Chongyang did not have enough authority, but because Qin Chongyang had to deal with these worldly affairs. If he stepped out, it would not be good. Qin Yunran held a superior position and would not go back on his words. When he stepped out, even if someone was displeased inwardly, they would certainly not dare to contradict Qin Yunran. "Wushuang, why are you not thanking the second chief for his favor?" Qin Chongyang said with a smile. Before Qin Wushuang could express anything, Qin Yunran laughed. "Little one, there is no need for thanks, right? Next time you come to my place, just drink with me. Don't get drunk after one cup." Qin Wushuang was moved inwardly. Submissively, he returned to his original position with a smile. It seemed that this second chief was indeed a heroic figure that was rough but meticulous. His words sounded like he was talking about drinking, yet smart people should be able to figure out the hidden meaning. Being qualified to drink the wine of the second sect master, Qin Yunran, was not a privilege that anyone could enjoy. Indeed, when honored warrior Ji Huai heard these words, he felt another wave of depression. Vividly, he felt that this matter had already surpassed his control. Initially, Qin Yu and honored warrior Ji Huai were figures of the same generation, and they were both well-known figures among the core disciples. Both were nominated as key training targets. At the same time, they were listed as candidates qualified to take over the position of the chief. Although there were a lot of candidates, the competition between Qin Yu and Ji Huai existed everywhere. Because of this competition, both sides were competing with each other. As a result, Qin Yu was severely injured in a duel. Ji Huai's exclusion of Qin Yu was extremely obvious. In fact, even though Guan He had ostracized Qin Yu, he could only be considered as an accomplice at the very most. The core person who was truly pushing out Qin Yu was this Reverend Ji Huai. But man proposes, God disposes. Although Qin Yu was successfully squeezed out of the competitive circle by him, Ji Huai's later development also seemed to have become unsmooth. Until now, he could only linger around the limit of a venerable one. It was already almost impossible to enter the supreme Tao realm, let alone become the leader of the sect. Even among the venerables, they could not enter the top 3. Therefore, when Qin Wushuang appeared as a descendant of Qin Yu, Ji Huai's first reaction was shock, then displeasure. He absolutely did not wish for Qin Yu's descendants to gain power on the aspiring throne mountain. That was because he felt that it was a potential threat to his position. Just as Honorable Ji Huai was preoccupied, Qin Chongyang opened his mouth again. Everyone, for the past few days, I have not been in the mountain gate. Instead, I have gone to the Heavenly Emperor Gate. Do you all know that something major has happened in the Heavenly Emperor Gate? Something big? Many people showed inquisitive expressions. Yes, this matter is not a child's play. It sounds that it might be beneficial to the Qin clan. However, it's hard to say whether it's a good thing or not. Qin Chongyang said, that Heavenly Luo Taoist sect has been reported by someone. Reported the Heavenly Luo Taoist sect. Reported them for what? What shady business has the Heavenly Luo Taoist sect done? Qin Chongyang said with a low voice, everyone already knows about the grudge between the Heavenly Luo Taoist sect and Qin Wushuang. However, perhaps everyone is unaware of how much sacrifice and effort Qin Wushuang has made behind the scenes. First, the Heavenly Luo Taoist sect spread rumors and enticed the freelance martial artists to invade the human countries. Next, they flew into a rage out of humiliation. The disciples of the Heavenly Luo Taoist sect went to the human countries and destroyed Qin Wushuang's sect in the human countries. Therefore, a moment ago when you doubted Qin Wushuang's identity and foundation, it was unnecessary worry. There is no need to doubt Qin Wushuang's loyalty to the Qin clan. The sacrifice he has made is much more than many people at the scene. Third chief, could it be martial artists from the human countries have come to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain to complain? How did they get here from millions of miles away? Yes, it's incredible. These people discussed spiritedly. Apparently, they all felt this matter was somewhat outrageous. Qin Wushuang also found it strange. People from the human countries had come to complain? Could it be someone from the Stargaze Palace? It should not be. This was not part of their plan. From Qin Chongyang's expression, there seemed to be a strange smile. You guys can't guess who is the one that has complained. This time, everyone became even more curious. They all begged Qin Chongyang to not keep them in suspense. However, Qin Chongyang seemed to be deliberately keeping them in suspense as he asked Qin Wushuang, Wushuang, do you know who it is? Qin Wushuang was moved inwardly. Could it be her? For some unknown reason, Qin Wushuang suddenly remembered Murong Su, that generous and persistent Missy. Ha, it seems Wushuang has guessed it. Everyone, the one that has complained is Murong Su, the Missy of the floating snow house master, Murong Qianji. When Qin Chongyang said here, he also laughed. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was shaken as countless emotions emerged from his heart. An inexplicable feeling of gratitude rose in his heart. After he had parted ways with Miss Murong at the border of the dispersed praying mountain, he felt that Miss Murong was going to travel far away. When he was at the Ironwood State City, Qin Wushuang had asked Black Panther to hint to Murong Su to fly far away. Unexpectedly, Murong Su had entered the Heavenly Emperor Mountain and complained directly to the Heavenly Emperor Gate. At this moment, regardless of how slow-witted Qin Wushuang was, he knew that Miss Qin Wushuang had not done this for herself, but for Qin Wushuang. Although these two had only interacted a few times, between the sounds of the zither, they had formed a form of mutual understanding. At this moment, when he suddenly heard this shocking news, the thin veil that had blocked Qin Wushuang's path had been removed. Since Miss Murong had acted with such high righteousness, if Qin Wushuang did not have any reaction, then he would be too slow-witted. Inwardly, all sorts of feelings welled up, and for a time, he was dazed on the spot. Qin Chongyang laughed. Indeed, this Miss Murong is beyond all expectations. Initially, when she had escaped from the marriage and refused to marry Luo Ting, it had already made all the people of the Xian Yuan Mound feel extremely curious. Now, this Miss Murong had made such a world-shocking move. Everyone said that Miss Murong was refined and cultured, yet she had made such a shocking move. Haha, indeed, she is an extraordinary girl. Wushuang, don't you think so? Qin Wushuang smiled awkwardly. Miss Murong is soft on the outside but firm on the inside. She has her own opinions. Qin Chongyang said again. If it was only Murong Su who had come to complain, the Heavenly Emperor Gate could have suppressed it if they wanted to protect the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. However, this time, many freelance martial artist representatives had also come to complain. They had all pointed their heads at the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. This Heavenly Luo Daoist sect is truly despicable. They had put down their pride and went to the human countries to kill the innocent. Such a trashy sect dared to covet the position of the Heavenly Emperor 8 Gates. It's truly absurd. Ji Song started to spew out dirty words. They deserve to be unlucky. By the way, Third Chief, what did the Heavenly Emperor say? Qin Chongyang said with a smile. The Heavenly Emperor did not state his position clearly. However, from what I saw, he should be planning to patch up the matter and keep the peace. Now, the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect has encountered such a major calamity. Most likely, the Heavenly Emperor will use this as an excuse to get out of the situation. He will be lenient. This is against the rules, right? Could it be that the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect does not need to be punished for committing such a major crime? If that's the case, in the future, anyone can kill their way to the human countries. I am afraid the calamity from 10,000 years ago will repeat itself. Qin Chongyang said with a smile. Regarding the exact ruling, we will know in 3 days. In 3 days, the Heavenly Emperor 8 Gates will reconvene at the Heavenly Emperor Gate and carry out the trial of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Wushuang, are you interested in going to listen? Qin Wushuang said. I could not ask for anything more. That's exactly what I wanted. Qin Chongyang said with a smile. Regardless of whether the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect will be punished or not, it's enough to infuriate them half to death when you appear before them. Suddenly, Qin Yunran spoke. Everyone, you must not treat this as a lively event. There are many things that can be done, you all must use your brains to think about it. This time, the judgment of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain to the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect is of utmost importance. If they cover up for the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect, to the Qin clan, it will definitely be a signal worth paying attention to. When Qin Wushuang heard these words, he also nodded heavily, for he felt it made sense. However, Qin Chongyang helped everyone reduce the pressure. Of course, we should not carry too heavy of a burden in our hearts. Regardless of the situation, the Qin clan will not lose our footing due to the changes in the outside world. After 3 days, Qin Chongyang took Qin Wushuang and rushed towards the Heavenly Emperor Gate. Currently, the Heavenly Emperor Gate was located at the southeast corner of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. This southeast direction was the corner with the most abundant fortune. Therefore, the Heavenly Emperor Gate was located here. Wushuang, regardless of how the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect will be judged, you must stay calm, do not let hatred get to your head. Qin Chongyang instructed carefully. Qin Wushuang said, "Third Chief, please rest assured. I already have my wish. Even if the Heavenly Emperor Gate does not make a ruling, I will settle all the evil deeds committed by the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect." Alright, since the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect has gone against the tide, it's natural for us to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. In the midst of their conversation, they had already arrived beneath the Heavenly Emperor Gate. Qin Chongyang held a high position among the Heavenly Emperor 8 gates. Naturally, no one stopped him. When they walked into the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, the leaders of the other sects all greeted Qin Wushuang. When they saw Qin Wushuang, they could not refrain from asking about his identity. Qin Chongyang acted in a secretive manner and did not expose Qin Wushuang's true identity. When they entered the Heavenly Emperor Gate, it appeared even livelier. The extravagant and majestic buildings of the entire Heavenly Emperor Gate made Qin Wushuang feel as if he was immersed in it. He felt that this style was simply a work of art excelling the heavens. It could not be more luxurious and imposing than this. Along the way they were unimpeded. In a moment they had entered the main meeting hall. Many leaders of the Heavenly Emperor 8 gates were already waiting in formation. Of course, this also included people of the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 583. Of course, the most conspicuous one was not the leaders of these sects, but the one sitting high on the dragon throne, the king of the entire Heavenly Emperor Mountain. With a stamp of his feet, the supreme figure that would shake the Heavenly Emperor Mountain 3 times, His Majesty the Heavenly Emperor. Finally, the people that only existed in legends had clearly appeared before Qin Wushuang. As Qin Wushuang looked at the Heavenly Emperor sitting high above, he seemed to see a ball of golden radiance. Yet, he also seemed to be in a state of chaos. He could not capture the true appearance of the Heavenly Emperor. A breathtaking yet gentle voice sounded like a great bell. "Everyone, in 3 days I welcome you to come again." The Heavenly Emperor Mountain has always been the leader of the Xian Yuan Mound and has set the example. Because of the hard work of the Heavenly Emperor 8 gates, the Heavenly Emperor Mountain has become the center of attention. The Heavenly Luo Daoist sect and the Floating Snow House are both important powerhouses of the Xian Yuan Mound. Regarding the handling of this matter, the Heavenly Emperor Mountain must also make a convincing decision. We cannot disappoint the hearts of all the powerhouses of the Xian Yuan Mound. These words did not reveal the truth. Even if everyone wanted to agree, they did not know from which angle. Thus, they could only remain silent and wait for the Heavenly Emperor to continue speaking. After the Heavenly Emperor had spoken these words, he did not continue. Instead, he said lightly, "Go and bring Miss Mu Rong and the leaders of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Let's see what's right and what's wrong." Qin Wushuang felt apprehensive inwardly. The words of the Heavenly Emperor appeared to be fair. However, Qin Wushuang had a subtle intuition that most likely, this matter would not have an ideal result. However, Qin Wushuang was calm. He had never expected the Heavenly Emperor Mountain to make a destructive ruling against the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Especially after he had destroyed the subduing Devil Stone tablet of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. He had thrown away the last bit of hope he had. Since he had the ability to solve the problem, why should he place his hopes on others? Even if this was the Heavenly Emperor, the ruler of the Xian Yuan Mound, the king of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. However, Qin Wushuang did not have much hope at all. No matter what the situation was, only his own pair of fists was the most reliable and most trustworthy. Mistress Mu Rong was brought up first. When Mistress Mu Rong's gaze brushed past Qin Wushuang, instantly, a wave of red clouds flew up from her haggard face. Her eyes also had some extra vigor. When Qin Wushuang saw how thin and haggard Miss Murong was, his heart skipped a beat and he felt a stab of pain. Compared to the last time they met in Sky Breaking City, Miss Murong seemed to have lost a lot of weight. However, the determination in her eyes were still the same as before. When their eyes met, it was as if they had exchanged 1,000 words, and a warm current surged in their hearts. Although there were many strong cultivators in front of them, it was as if only the two of them were left in the Heavenly Emperor Palace. Immediately after, the 3 Tao warriors of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect were also brought up. When Luo Tongtian saw Qin Wushuang, he instantly remembered something. He had never met Qin Wushuang face to face. However, with his powerful perception, he recognized Qin Wushuang as soon as he left. Instantly, he glared at Qin Wushuang with anger. If all these elite warriors of the Supreme Tao were not present, most likely he would have lost control and killed Qin Wushuang on the spot. Qin Wushuang shot a cold glance at Luo Tongtian. Clearly, he would not be intimidated by Luo Tongtian's gaze. Luo Tongtian was filled with hatred. However, before all these elite warriors, he would not dare to act presumptuously. Besides, there were more important matters waiting for him to explain. The Heavenly Emperor was sitting high up in the air and had a panoramic view of all the details. Yet, he acted as if he did not see them. He only spoke lightly. Murong Su, you came to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain to complain despite the arduous journey. You said that the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect had violated the 10,000-year agreement and invaded the human countries. Is this true? Do you have evidence? Your Majesty, that Luo Ting had bewitched those freelance martial artists to harass the human countries. Many freelance martial artists at the Ironwood State City of the Orderly Mountain Prefecture had witnessed it with their own eyes. Although Luo Ting had already received his retribution, the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect behind him could not escape the responsibility. Later on, the destruction of the Stargaze Palace of the human countries was also a crime committed by the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Your Majesty, since the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect had acted so recklessly, if we do not punish them severely, I am afraid it would be difficult to convince the public. Murong Su was neither servile nor overbearing as he spoke with a clear voice. Under the imposing manner of the Heavenly Emperor, although he was somewhat nervous, in the end, he overcame his nervousness. The Heavenly Emperor nodded lightly. You said that Luo Ting had bewitched him. Some of those freelance martial artists from different places had also witnessed the scene. However, according to the investigation, this matter was done by Luo Ting alone. The higher-ups of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect did not bewitch or instigate him. This Luo Ting had left on his own and did not receive the approval from the leader of the sect. Luo Tongtian took over the topic. Your Majesty, this Murong Su had an engagement with Luo Ting. Since she was able to break the engagement, it proves that she had a personal grudge with Luo Ting. She had come to complain due to a personal grudge, and it was suspected that she had used her position to avenge a personal grudge. Since she had sued the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect, I am not convinced. Luo Tongtian spoke with the tone of a victim. Murong Su's expression was calm as if she had already experienced Luo Tongtian's shameless face. Head Dao Luo, it's true that I do not like Luo Ting. However, I did not expose him because I do not like him. It's because his actions had indeed angered both humans and gods. His actions would not only push the human countries back into the abyss of eternal damnation, it would also damage the reputation of the Xian Yuan Mound. In the worst case, it could even trigger a conflict between the forbidden spiritual zones. Luo Tongtian said with a cold sneer. Little girl, you only know how to use alarmist words to scare people. Do you think it would be easy for conflicts to arise between the forbidden spiritual zones? The Heavenly Emperor has always been fair and wise. How could he be bewitched by your lies? Suddenly, Zhuoleng Shuang, the fourth Dao warrior behind Luo Tongtian, said with a gloomy voice, Miss Murong, since you want to sue the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect, do you dare to let me ask you a few questions? Murong Su said lightly, Even if you ask 100 questions, I am not afraid. Zhuoleng Shuang nodded. Okay, I will ask you. Everyone said that you had an affair with Qin Wushuang of the human countries, and that you had colluded with him to deal with Luo Ting. You had deliberately angered him, and caused his mind to become chaotic. This matter, is it true? Murong Su said with a somewhat mocking tone. Luo Ting's mind had never been normal. Since his mind was chaotic, there was no need for anyone to deliberately anger him. Zhuoleng Shuang said with hatred, Little girl, you have such a vicious mouth. Do you dare to answer? Do you have a selfless relationship with that Qin Wushuang? Do you dare to admit that you do not have this Qin Wushuang in your heart? These words were extremely treacherous, and for a time, Murong Su did not know how to answer. Qin Wushuang could no longer remain silent. He walked out and stood before Murong Su. He bowed to the Heavenly Emperor and said, Your Majesty, I am that Qin Wushuang, and I would like to speak a few words. The Heavenly Emperor said lightly, Today, whether it is reasonable or unreasonable, you are all qualified to speak. Qin Wushuang nodded and glanced at Murong Su. His resolute eyes had conveyed a form of determination. It had instantly steadied Murong Su's state of mind. Left Dao warrior, Miss Murong and I got to know each other through the sound of the zither. Since the beginning of time, I was moved by Miss Murong's zither music and admired her greatly. That was my, Qin Wushuang's, one-sided admiration. What does it have to do with Miss Murong? You said that Miss Murong's mouth was poisonous, but I think your aggressive words are the real stinking mouth. When Qin Wushuang said these words, even Murong Su was incomparably surprised. Her heart was beating rapidly. She really did not expect that Qin Wushuang would say these words in public. It sounded like he was exonerating Murong Su for her. But his previous expression, when put together, was more like a generous and straightforward confession. Zhuoleng Shuang sneered. I don't care about the filthy matters between the two of you. In short, your love for each other is not fake. In this way, Murong Su's words will definitely be biased. How can you believe her accusation? If you do not side with the adulterer, who will you side with? On Murong Su's beautiful face, there was an embarrassed expression. These words, for a young girl, were ultimately not easy to accept, even though she was bold, persistent, and opinionated. However, under the gaze of all these eyes, she felt wronged to the point of speechlessness when someone splashed dirty water on her. Qin Wushuang looked at Zhuoleng Shuang coldly. Zhuoleng Shuang, at your level, you are truly invincible when you are despicable. Didn't the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect always run amok? How come up to this point, you do not dare to admit any of the things you have done, and are using malicious words to hurt others to cover up your actions? Is the grand Heavenly Luo Daoist sect only left with such despicable methods to cover up your crimes? If that's the case, even if you can deceive the heavens and cross the sea today, there will always be a fair ruling. Luo Tongtian swore. Qin Wushuang, you still dare to speak nonsense here? You attacked the mountain gate of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect and killed the successor of the sect. These are not fake, right? It's not fake at all. Qin Wushuang appeared calm and unhurried as his tone was full of disdain. I am not like the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect, a coward who does not dare to admit what he has done. That's right, I destroyed the subduing Devil Stone Tablet. I also killed Luo Ting. And those 4 vicious dogs of the morning sun town, I killed them all. I also controlled landlord Zhua, Luoyang, and entered the 9 refined mysterious Wind Valley. What about it? What kind of cause, what kind of effect? From beginning to end, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect never gave me a way out. Why should I give you a way out? Qin Wushuang's voice was deafening as he spoke to the heavens and the earth. Your Majesty, even if the heavenly Luo Daoist sect is not punished, I have nothing to say. Justice resides in my heart. Sooner or later, I will seek revenge from them. Everything I did started because the heavenly Luo Daoist sect pursued me. They pushed me too far. As soon as I entered the Xian Yuan Mound, they issued a bounty to kill me. Next, Luo Ting made a move himself. In the end, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect almost turned out in full force. When they could not kill me, they took out their anger on my sect and caused a disaster to befall my sect. With such hatred, what's wrong with me retaliating? It seemed that Qin Wushuang was not satisfied as he pointed to Murong Su. Out of justice, Miss Murong came to file a complaint without any hesitation. Of course, her noble character and unquestionable integrity is a good story in the world. Yet, what did the heavenly Luo Daoist sect scold her for? Everything shows that the heavenly Luo Daoist sect is willing to degrade themselves. His words of justice were forceful and powerful. It made those leaders of the heavenly Emperor 8 Gates to sweat inwardly for Qin Wushuang. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 584. The High and Mighty Heavenly Emperor also seemed to be slightly surprised by Qin Wushuang's fearless temperament. At the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, he had seen too many young people. Among the Heavenly Emperor 8 Gates, there were not any young people he had not seen before. However, this Qin Wushuang from the human countries had made the Heavenly Emperor feel a trace of surprise. To be able to maintain such powerful calmness before all these supreme Dao elite warriors, this Qin Wushuang had gained a whole new level of respect. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was feeling somewhat anxious. Yet, it was inconvenient for him to give any hints to Qin Wushuang. However, after Qin Wushuang had finished speaking these words, strangely, he did not continue to speak. Suddenly, the Heavenly Emperor laughed. Everyone, did you hear that? There is the so-called saying of heroes come from the youth. For the Heavenly Emperor 8 Gates, we need such young people with courage. Alright, I will say a few words. The Heavenly Luo Daoist sect should not have pursued Qin Wushuang for some small matters, nor should they have harassed the human countries. As for the matter of the Stargaze Palace, whether it is related to the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect, I have already sent people to investigate. Considering that the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect has already suffered a major blow, this matter is decided. From now on, regardless of who it is, regardless of the grudges, all conflicts must be solved within the Xian Yuan Mound. Even if you must go outside of the Xian Yuan Mound, you must not harass the human countries. If anyone violates this rule, they will be severely punished. The words of the Heavenly Emperor appeared to be extremely fair. However, being an obedient person, Qin Wushuang could hear that in the end, the Heavenly Emperor did not want to suppress the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect too much. Therefore, Miss Mu Rong's actions would at most force the Heavenly Emperor to express his stance and put an end to future risk. As for the past, although it was said that it was still being investigated, it was obvious that the result would be left unsettled. Thinking here, Qin Wushuang sneered inwardly and did not speak a word. Chongyang, for this matter, what do you think? Suddenly, the Heavenly Emperor asked Qin Chongyang. Qin Chongyang said with a smile, "How could I object to the ruling of the Heavenly Emperor? Now, this Qin Wushuang is already a disciple of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. You can count all grudges to the Qin clan. Qin Chongyang's casual tone was full of confidence and power. Even in front of His Majesty the Celestial Emperor, he did not compromise and bow his head. Luo Tongtian looked at Qin Wushuang with resentment and swallowed his anger. Your Majesty, this Qin Wushuang destroyed my mountain gate. The heavenly Luo Daoist sect will not rest until one of us dies. However, I will definitely remember your Majesty's decree and will never let the flames of war spread to the human countries. Qin Wushuang said indifferently, Luo Tongtian, your words are like bullshit. I don't believe your bullshit at all. If it wasn't for the fact that I had already predicted your despicableness and transferred my family and fellow sect members, you would have succeeded long ago. However, for each of those vengeful souls from the Stargaze Palace, I will seek revenge from the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Just you wait. Luo Tongtian said angrily. Are your fellow disciples the fate of the Stargaze Palace? Are the disciples of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect not fate? You destroyed my mountain gate and hundreds of core disciples of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect died. There were also some elders and countless ordinary disciples. For this debt, even if you don't look for me, I will look for you. Qin Wushuang gave tit for tat. That was your own sin. I only know that since you have created the evil cause, you must accept the evil consequences. The Heavenly Emperor said with a smile. All right, us martial artists of the Xian Yuan Mound do not pay attention to bickering. The personal grudges between you can be solved in private. Regardless of the methods used, it is the law of survival of the fittest in the Tian Xian land. There is only one point: you must not cross the bottom line. After he had finished, the Heavenly Emperor said to Murong Su, Miss Murong Su, are you satisfied with this solution? Initially, Murong Su had come to complain because she was worried that Luo Ting would pose a fatal threat to Qin Wushuang. However, when she heard that the headquarters of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect had been destroyed by Qin Wushuang and that Qin Wushuang had already sought refuge with the heavenly Emperor Qin clan, it meant that Qin Wushuang was not afraid of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. As long as Qin Wushuang was not in danger, her mood had calmed down. She said, Your Majesty has handled this matter impartially, I have no objections. The heavenly Emperor chuckled. I've always heard that Mu Rong Qianji had a good daughter, and that the floating snow house has a good daughter. Seeing you today, indeed you have lived up to your reputation. When he said to Qin Chongyang with a mocking tone, Chongyang, does your aspiring throne mountain intend to become in-laws with the floating snow house? Ha ha. Qin Chongyang said with a smile, This will depend on the thoughts of the young people. Your Majesty, could it be you intend to officiate the marriage or act as a matchmaker? The heavenly Emperor laughed. I do have this thought. Unfortunately, with my position, it's not appropriate for me to officiate the marriage or act as a matchmaker. Everyone laughed. In the end, Murong Su was a girl. When she heard the words of everyone, a red glow flashed across her face as she retreated to the side. After leaving the heavenly Emperor Mountain, Qin Wushuang and Murong Su walked side by side. These two shared the same thoughts and were filled with faint joy. Miss Murong, thank you. Qin Wushuang fixed his gaze at Murong Su and said from the bottom of his heart. Murong Su revealed a light smile. Young Master Qin, it's good as long as you are fine. At this moment, Little Bamboo also interrupted. Young Master Qin, this time, my miss has truly thrown caution to the wind. Now, I am afraid the entire Xian Yuan Mound is talking about my Mississippi. I really don't know what Master will think this time. I am afraid he will blame Mississippi. When Murong Su ran away from home, perhaps Mu Rong Qianji would not say anything. However, this time, she had come to the heavenly Emperor Mountain to file a complaint. The public opinion of the outside world could easily come to a conclusion. Murong Su was running around for Qin Wushuang. Initially, it seemed that the private relationship between her and Qin Wushuang was true. Once the wind of public opinion blew, it would be detrimental to the reputation of the floating snow house. If Murong Su truly walked together with Qin Wushuang, it would not matter. He was only afraid that in the end, Murong Su would not walk together with Qin Wushuang. Hearing Little Bamboo's words, Murong Su comforted her. "Little Bamboo, don't worry. This is my choice. If father truly blames me, if the floating snow house truly feels ashamed, even if I leave the floating snow house, I will not regret it." Murong Su spoke with a determined tone. However, when she spoke these words, she appeared indifferent, as if she was talking about an extremely ordinary matter. Instantly, Qin Wushuang felt waves of emotions. If a girl had done so much for you, even an idiot should know her intentions. Little Bamboo said with a stuttering tone, "Missy, in that case, master will be sad." Murong Su said with a smile, "You silly girl, I am not cutting off my relationship with father by leaving the floating snow house. Father is still my father. I just don't like the floating snow house forcing things on me. However, I know that this is not father's intention." "Missy Murong," Qin Wushuang said emotionally, "how am I, Qin Wushuang, worthy of you treating me like this? For such kindness, even if I have to sacrifice my life, it will be difficult for me to repay you." Little Bamboo chuckled. "You big block of wood, I see that you are very smart when dealing with enemies. How come you are so stupid before my Missy? Missy is doing these things because she likes it. Could it be that she wants you to repay her?" "Little Bamboo, you talk too much." Murong Su's cheeks flushed red. Little Bamboo stuck out her tongue and said with a smile, "Missy, I see that young Master Qin is like a big block of wood. Please enlighten him." Qin Wushuang looked at Murong Su seriously, his expression full of concentration. A boundless love welled up in his heart. This kind of love was different from the love he had for his family, friends, and masters. However, it was equally sincere and passionate. Moreover, compared to those feelings, it was much sweeter. "Hee, Missy, you guys go ahead and chat. I will wait for you in front." Little Bamboo winked at Qin Wushuang and made a funny face. Then, she ran ahead. After running a few steps, she suddenly thought of something and turned around with a smile. She said to Qin Wushuang, "Big block of wood, let me tell you. My master calls Missy Su'er. What Missy Murong, it's too distant. Hearing it makes my ears uncomfortable." Qin Wushuang was stunned. Then, he smiled. Looking at Little Bamboo's departing figure, Murong Su said with a smile, "Young Master Qin, this girl Little Bamboo has been spoiled by me. You have to be more responsible. I see that Little Bamboo is innocent and straightforward. She is very cute. Only someone like Missy Murong can have such an obedient maid." Murong Su smiled and revealed a mischievous smile. She raised her head and looked at Qin Wushuang. "Do you still like to call me Missy Murong?" Qin Wushuang was stunned. He had already developed a habit. At this moment, he understood. Happiness welled up in his heart and he blurted out, "Su-er." Murong Su smiled sweetly and looked ahead leisurely. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the distant mountains. Even though she was looking at the setting sun, Murong Su felt incomparably happy at this moment. She said with a somewhat infatuated tone, "Big brother Qin, ever since I was young, I have never felt so happy. If this setting sun doesn't set and stays here forever, that would be great." These words were somewhat childish, but it was the portrayal of Murong Su's feelings at this moment. After wandering outside for so many years, her heart was miserable. At least, there was no goal and no hope. At this moment, in front of the man she admired, their hearts and minds were connected. All the wonderful things in the world could not surpass the happiness in front of her eyes. Qin Wushuang smiled. "Su-er, the setting sun has set. Tomorrow there will be an even more beautiful morning sun. Forever and ever, we will watch the sunrise and sunset together." No matter who it is, no matter what it is, we will never separate. Murong Su's body shook. She looked at Qin Wushuang with a sentimental gaze. Big brother Qin, are these really your heartfelt words? Absolutely true. Qin Wushuang's face was full of sincerity. No matter who it is, no matter what it is, no matter what difficulties or obstacles, are you willing to work hard for Su Er and flatten all obstacles? I am willing. Qin Wushuang held Mu Rong's soft hands tightly and said emotionally as he looked at her eyes that were as clear as the autumn water. Murong Su smiled with tears in her eyes. She only nodded. Big brother Qin, I am very happy. With these words of yours, I feel that my wandering for so many years was correct. It was the wisest choice I made in my life. If they forced me to marry Luo Ting, I would die. Don't worry, Su Er. Luo Ting is no longer here. Qin Wushuang comforted her softly. Murong Su nodded heavily. However, there was still some faint worry in her expression. 7 consecutive explosions begin. I will definitely finish before midnight. Readers, please be at ease. Old Bull will definitely not delay the account until next month. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 585. Qin Wushuang was a meticulous person. After the thin veil between him and Murong Su had been lifted, both parties shared the same thoughts. When he saw Murong Su acting this way, he knew that Murong Su still had a knot in her heart. Su Er, do you have any other worries? Murong Su did not want Qin Wushuang to worry too much. Yet, she also wanted Qin Wushuang to know about her worries. She hesitated and did not know whether she should say it or not. When Qin Wushuang saw Murong Su's hesitation, he looked at Murong Su with a sincere gaze. He grabbed Murong Su's hands and said emotionally, Su Er, you have worked hard for me. Now, regardless of the difficulties, let me bear them with you, all right? Murong Su met Qin Wushuang's fervent gaze and her heart was completely melted. She nodded. Brother Qin, I do have a layer of worry. It's because my marriage was decided by my grandfather, and I am the only descendant of my father's bloodline. Because my father was obsessed with the way of the sword, he did not have any children. Now, in the floating snow house, besides my father, there is another uncle who has the same strength as my father. The other 2 uncles are slightly weaker. They have always tried their best to marry me out of the floating snow house. I am worried that when they know that I have fallen in love with you, they will oppose the relationship between you and me. I am not afraid of them, but I am afraid that they will use this to pressure my father and put him in a difficult position. Qin Wushuang listened to everything calmly. After a moment of thinking, he asked Murong Su, Su Er, they must be interfering with our relationship because I am a disciple of the Qin clan, right? Yes. Murong Su nodded lightly. Now, they all stubbornly believe that the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan is on the decline. And in the future, they will be driven out of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain by the sound of Thunder Sect and the Heavenly Punishing Villa. Qin Wushuang revealed a light smile, and a trace of arrogance emerged from the corner of his mouth. Su Er, in your heart, what do you think of my Heavenly Emperor Qin clan? Murong Su said seriously. Inwardly, I believe that you will become the hero of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain and turn the tide. Everything you do now is going in this direction. Su Er believes in her own judgment. Big brother Qin, you can definitely do it. Murong Su added in a firm tone. Qin Wushuang smiled. Su Er, I promise you. Not only will I change their prejudices, I will also go to the floating snow house and marry you in a grand manner. I will make everyone in the floating snow house proud of you and make them regret their choice. Murong Su's eyes flashed with joy and sweetness. She tightly grasped Qin Wushuang's thick hand and said, "Big brother Qin, even without these things, as long as Su can be with you, I'm not afraid of any hardship." The two of them shared the same mind and did not have the slightest doubt. They only had one goal, and that was to sweep away all obstacles before them. Of course, these obstacles would not be easy to sweep away. "Big brother Qin, although you and I share the same mind, I cannot return to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan with you. Can you understand me?" Murong Su raised her head and asked. Of course, Qin Wushuang knew. Although they shared the same mind, they did not share the same status. With Murong Su's identity as the daughter of a major family, she could not accompany him to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan casually. Or else, outsiders would look down on the floating snow house's status. "Su, I know your intentions. At the Judge Mountain Prefecture, I met your father. I will return to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain and report to the chief. Then, I will go to the floating snow house to visit Lord Murong." Murong Su was full of joy. "Big brother Qin, I am afraid I will delay your business. Su, this time, I did not come to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan for a big mission. If I must have a mission, it would be to train harder. I want to help the Qin clan solve their problems. Big brother Qin, don't be too hasty. With your age, you still have a long way to go. It's already good that you have reached this stage. Right now, Su is no match for Big brother Qin." Murong Su was full of pride. She remembered that when she first met Qin Wushuang, he was only at the middle stage. In just a few years, he had reached the peak of the transformation void martial stage and could break into the profound void martial stage at any time. And she, Murong Su, had started training at the spiritual martial force at a young age. Up to now, she was only at the transformation void martial stage. When she remembered the situation when they first met in the human countries, Murong Su felt another wave of sweetness. Those short memories from the past kept emerging in her head. Each detail appeared wonderful. Happiness emerged spontaneously. When Qin Wushuang saw Murong Su revealing the naive appearance of a little girl, he realized that in fact, Murong Su was 2 years younger than him. And the pressure she had endured at such a young age was so overwhelming. When he thought of this moment, endless tenderness emerged from his heart. He only wanted to protect this charming girl and not let her suffer any more grievances. "Big brother Qin, tomorrow I will return to the floating snow house with Little Bamboo. I will wait for you day and night, okay?" With her picturesque face, Murong Su asked Qin Wushuang. "Okay, I will be there as soon as you arrive." Qin Wushuang promised. "Big brother Qin." Murong Su paused for a moment. "When you go, if other people from the floating snow house speak to you with disrespect, please forgive them, okay?" Qin Wushuang laughed. "Su, no need to tell me, of course I know. I will do my best to show you the proper etiquette." When Murong Su saw Qin Wushuang being so considerate, she laughed. "I am not asking you to suffer. If they go too far, don't back down. Just don't take the initiative to fight with them. I don't want them to bully you." Qin Wushuang laughed. "Okay, I will do as you say." After the agreement, Murong Su felt much more relaxed. To Murong Su, it would take at least half a month to travel to the floating snow house. Qin Wushuang was somewhat worried that the heavenly Luo Taoist sect would seek revenge. Instantly, he said to Murong Su, "Su, since you went to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain to sue the heavenly Luo Taoist sect, I am worried that they will harm you. Tomorrow morning, I will send you off." Of course, Murong Su would not mind. In that case, she could spend more time with Qin Wushuang. When he returned to the aspiring throne mountain, Qin Wushuang found Qin Chongyang. Qin Chongyang laughed. "You are back already? You did not send Miss Murong off?" Qin Wushuang explained the situation and Qin Chongyang laughed. "Now you receive the treatment of a core disciple. You do not need to report any of your actions. You can make your own decisions. Even if you leave the aspiring throne mountain, you only need to speak through the communication jade plate. Third chief, I don't know if I can speak about some things. Qin Chongyang laughed. Inside the upright morality hall, you can speak whatever is on your mind. Yes, at the Heavenly Emperor Gate, the Heavenly Emperor is high above and I cannot see through the truth. It seems that the Heavenly Emperor does not have any special stance. However, I always have a strange feeling that the Heavenly Emperor seems to have a stance, and this stance is not beneficial to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Qin Chongyang was slightly surprised as he looked at Qin Wushuang with astonishment. He drew a breath of cold air. Wushuang, did you observe this, or did you just say it casually? This is my intuition, I don't know if it's reliable. Qin Chongyang gave a long sigh and could not speak for a while. After a while, he looked at Qin Wushuang with a solemn look and instructed seriously. Wushuang, for this matter, you must not mention it to anyone else. Just keep it to yourself. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang's heart thumped. This way, his guess was correct. Qin Chongyang observed his expression and knew that Qin Wushuang was extremely intelligent. He was already certain. He gave a long sigh. Wushuang, do you think that just the sound of Thunder Sect and the Heavenly Punishing Villa could force the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan to be unable to move? If the Heavenly Emperor Gate had not leaned to the side, how could the Qin clan have been enduring silently and not retaliating strongly after being defeated? Could it be that everything is because of the standpoint of the Heavenly Emperor Gate? Qin Wushuang felt apprehensive inwardly. Don't forget, the previous generation of the Heavenly Emperor Gate was the Qin clan. And not the Xian clan. Among the other 7 gates of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, the one they restrain the most is the seemingly down-and-out Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Therefore, the Heavenly Emperor Gate will never stand on the side of the Qin clan. They are always on guard against their predecessors. Qin Wushuang could not make a sound. He only felt that indeed, the situation of the Qin clan was extremely difficult. Even the ruler of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain was being fair on the surface and pushing them aside in secret. One could imagine their situation. Wushuang, with your talent and intelligence, in the future at the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, you must suppress your edge. Do not let the Heavenly Emperor Gate feel threatened by you. As soon as you make the Heavenly Emperor Gate feel restless, your days will become extremely difficult. Of course, I am not encouraging you to tuck your tail between your legs. Instead, I want you to show some cowardice, it's the way to protect yourself. Qin Wushuang was speechless. Although Qin Chongyang was an elder at the level of an idol in his heart, Qin Wushuang did not know how to respond to his words. His personality was to do certain things and not to do certain things. If the matter could not be suppressed, it must erupt. It was definitely not Qin Wushuang's style to make him show some cowardice. Of course, it was not that Qin Wushuang could not endure silently. Using the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect as an example, he had done enough to endure silently. However, these things would change according to the situation. When Qin Chongyang saw Qin Wushuang did not nod, he did not blame him. On the contrary, he felt somewhat gratified inwardly. It was because this was where Qin Wushuang was different from other core disciples. He would never brush you off. At any time, he would never give up on his personal philosophy. Even when facing elite warriors of the Supreme Tao, it would be the same. Perhaps it was this powerful temperament and confidence that made him stand out from the masses? As Qin Chongyang thought this way, regardless, this Qin Wushuang deserved to be looked forward to. He was a special chess piece that was completely different from the other core disciples. Even as a Supreme Tao elite warrior, he could not predict the potential hidden in this kid. He could only say one word, unfathomable. After returning to the ascending dragon slope, Qin Wushuang took out the sealed scroll again. This was the first time he used the sealed scroll after he had escaped. Currently, he was at the peak of the transformation void martial stage. Compared to his previous refined void martial stage, the level of his summoning was one level higher. Naturally, he could already summon spiritual beasts at the perfect void martial stage. When he took out this sealed scroll, instantly he felt something different. This sealed scroll was filled with spiritual chi movements. What was going on? Stunned, Qin Wushuang sensed it slightly and understood what was going on. The layer of spiritual chi movements on the surface was completely the same as the spiritual chi from the ley lines of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. In other words, this sealed scroll had taken the initiative to absorb the spiritual chi from countless ley lines. This had made those sealed spiritual beasts appear even more clear, sparkling and full of vitality. We are about to head to the floating snow house. Everyone give your monthly votes. Let Xing He rush up at the last moment. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 586. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was overjoyed. As he looked at the formation of this sealed scroll, the outer layer of spiritual chi was extremely rich. It seemed that it had absorbed a lot of spiritual chi. Even if he did not continue to add spiritual chi for 3 or 5 years, most likely it would not affect the supply of spiritual chi. As long as the spiritual chi of this sealed scroll would not be cut off, those spiritual beasts would maintain sufficient combat power. This would save Qin Wushuang a lot of trouble. Not only would it save time, it would also save crystal stones. He made hand gestures and activated the sealed scroll. Then, he chanted the summoning spell. This time, 8 different lights with different temperaments scuttled out from the sealed scroll. 5 of them were already his old friends. They were already familiar with Qin Wushuang. However, after being suppressed for such a long time, each of them seemed to be in a rush. As soon as they came out, each of them had a face full of joy. The other 3 with more imposing temperament were spiritual beasts at the perfect void martial stage. These 3 spiritual beasts were rending earth devil sheep, great desolate giant monkey, and illusionary cloud divine dog. It's an honor to meet you, Master. Clearly, these 3 spiritual beasts that came out for the first time were also extremely happy. Finally, they could break free from the endless suffocation of the seal and experience the outside world. Freedom, it's great. These 8 spiritual beasts all transformed into human form consciously and stood before Qin Wushuang. After Qin Wushuang inspected them, he laughed. As usual, the 3 new ones, please introduce yourselves. Rending Earth Devil Sheep, I specialize in Earth Attribute Divine Skills. I have a powerful impact on the ground. Great Desolate Giant Monkey, I specialize in Transformation, Charm, and Disguise. I also have powerful frontal attack power. Illusionary Cloud Divine Dog, I specialize in aerial combat. My speed is extremely fast, my attack power is hidden, and I specialize in sneak attacks. After these 3 spiritual beasts had finished introducing themselves, Qin Wushuang nodded with extreme satisfaction. Good, this time I summoned you guys to give you an important task. We are willing to listen to your orders. Qin Wushuang said with a smile. You will know the clues tomorrow morning. Early next morning, Qin Wushuang woke up early. Qin Lan was looking into the distance from the slope. When he saw Qin Wushuang walk out, he called out with a smile. Junior Brother Wushuang, good morning. Brother Lan was even earlier. Seeing that Qin Wushuang was about to go out, Qin Lan asked, Are you going out to cultivate? I have some personal matters to attend to. Brother Lan, please help yourself, Qin Wushuang said with a smile. Qin Lan smiled and struck up a conversation. Last time at the Upright Morality Hall, it really opened my eyes. Junior brother Wushuang, the second chief is treating you to a drink, everyone is envious. You didn't see the expressions of those elders and venerables. Haha, it was really too exciting. Earlier, I was worried that you would be ostracized by those core disciples with a sense of superiority. But now, it seems that they wouldn't dare to provoke you. Brother, when you become rich in the future, you must help this foolish brother. Qin Wushuang laughed. Since we are all from the same bloodline, it's meaningless to provoke each other. Brother Lon, I'll take my leave first. Let's spar again when we're free. Alright, junior brother Wushuang, for sure I will make you my friend. Qin Lon chuckled and waved his hand at Qin Wushuang. Then, he sent off Qin Wushuang with his eyes. When Qin Wushuang rushed to the guest house of the aspiring throne mountain, Murong Su was already waiting there for a moment. When Little Bamboo saw Qin Wushuang drop from the cloud, she said with great joy, "Young Master Qin is here. Su Little Bamboo, let's go." After leaving the aspiring throne mountain and the heavenly emperor mountain, Qin Wushuang did not dare to let down his guard. Since Bao Bao and Lone had come with him, with these two living treasures, the journey would not be lonely. With this escort they had gone for 4 or 5 days and covered 1/3 of the journey. Murong Su was completely immersed in happiness. With a heart full of joy, he did not pay attention to the time. On the other hand, Little Bamboo counted the days with her fingers. "Mistress, if young Master Qin is going to escort us again, we will arrive at the floating snow house. I think it's better to let young Master Qin wait here for a while. At least let him wait for about 10 days before rushing to the floating snow house." Murong Su was extremely unwilling to part with Qin Wushuang. Yet, she had no choice but to part with him temporarily. In the current situation, she could not bring Qin Wushuang back to the floating snow house directly. In that case, it would be the same as demonstrating her power to the higher-ups of the floating snow house. It would not help to solve the conflict at all. She would go back first to sound out the situation and slow down the situation. It would be more beneficial to lay the foundation for Qin Wushuang's journey. Qin Wushuang clapped his hand and 8 figures flashed out from the sky. Murong Su and Little Bamboo were slightly surprised. Qin Wushuang said, "Su these 8 people are spiritual beasts. Although their strength is not enough to defy the natural order, I am assured with them escorting you back to the floating snow house." These 8 great spiritual beasts were the 8 spiritual beasts that Qin Wushuang had already summoned. Murong Su was somewhat surprised. Bao Bao laughed. "Senior Sister Murong, these are our boss trump cards. Or else, with so many people of the heavenly Luo Taoist sect surrounding us and so many freelance martial artists crossing the border, how could we do it without help?" Little Bamboo chuckled. "Great, young Master Qin, you have so many secrets. I must explain to Mistress, ha ha." Qin Wushuang said with a smile. "Let's talk about these in detail when we arrive at the floating snow house." He turned to speak to those 8 great spiritual beasts. "It will take about 10 days to reach the floating snow house from here. You will split into 3 groups. 2 will lead the way, 4 will protect Su and the remaining 2 will cover the rear. Stay close to each other. If there are any unexpected situations, inform me immediately. I will not be too far away from you guys." Among the 8 great spiritual beasts, naturally, the 3 at the perfect void martial stage held the highest position. Each of the 3 groups was led by 1 at the perfect void martial stage to ensure the balance of power. When Murong Su saw Qin Wushuang had arranged everything so thoroughly, he felt even more touched. He bid farewell to Qin Wushuang reluctantly. Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao and Lone walked slowly behind him. They planned to go to the floating snow house 10 days after Murong Su had arrived home. As he watched the 8 great spiritual beasts escort Murong Su's group to leave, Bao Bao laughed. "What was that saying? Lovers will find their way together, right?" "Haha, Bao Bao, for your young age you know a lot." Lone mocked him. Bao Bao laughed evilly. Of course, I am like you, a natural airhead. It would be boring to live. Lone laughed. I am boring, why don't you find one? Show me what you've got. Bao Bao said with an arrogant tone, I will not let you see. By the way, boss, when we go to the Heavenly Emperor Gate this time, just what does that Heavenly Emperor look like? Is he fierce? When Qin Wushuang mentioned the Heavenly Emperor Gate, he felt somewhat disappointed inwardly. He shook his head. The matter of the Heavenly Emperor Gate is already in the past. Let's not talk about it. By the way, you two, have you delayed your training recently? Bao Bao said proudly. Of course not, at the aspiring Throne Mountain, I worked hard. Boss, let me tell you, I feel that I am about to enter the profound void martial stage. Stunned, Qin Wushuang felt somewhat impressed by Bao Bao. Each time Qin Wushuang broke through, he had encountered fortuitous opportunities. Additionally, his body had gone through the baptism of the divine light and had excellent natural conditions. For this Bao Bao, he did not rely on fortuitous opportunities, but on his own talent. This meant that Bao Bao's ancient spiritual monkey bloodline was indeed powerful. Lone, how are you doing? Qin Wushuang asked. Boss, ever since that time when the third chief said that I might be a mutated spiritual beast, I seem to have gained a surge of power. I feel that the profound void martial stage is not too far away. Qin Wushuang laughed. That's good, you two are different from the sealed spiritual beasts. You have always followed me through life and death and built a life and death relationship. I don't wish for you guys to be outdone by the sealed spiritual beast. Bao Bao stuck out his chest and made a solemn vow. Boss, don't worry. I will speed up and strive to catch up to you. When you enter the Supreme Dao stage, I will follow behind you. Haha, Senior Lone, it would be great if you said you are a mutated spiritual beast. When the three of us break through together, 3 Supreme Dao elite warriors will join hands. How majestic would that be? Fervent lights also flashed across Lone's eyes. Clearly, he also yearned for such situation. In the past, he had never dreamed of entering the Supreme Dao stage. However, ever since Qin Chongyang's words, he had gained a lot of indescribable motivation. When he trained, he seemed to have gained more spiritual qi. Suddenly, Bao Bao asked, Boss, have you refined that sky-pilfered pill? Qin Wushuang said with composure. Now, I am not in a rush to refine the sky-pilfered pill. I will let it stay in my stomach. I can enter the profound void martial stage at any time. The 2 chiefs asked me to consolidate and not to be in a rush. I think they have their reasons. Therefore, I have been consolidating the transformation void martial stage. I will wait for the right opportunity to advance to the profound void martial stage. Bao Bao gave a long sigh. Boss, it seems we cannot catch up to you. You will enter the profound void martial stage as soon as you break through. Then, you will refine the sky-pilfered pill and enter the perfect void martial stage in the blink of an eye. Regardless of our speed, we cannot compare to you jumping 2 levels. Qin Wushuang laughed. Then I will try not to use the sky-pilfered pill. The 3 of them walked slowly along the way and were not in a rush. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed. Those 8 great spiritual beasts also sent news through the communication jade plate that they had successfully sent Miss Mu Rong back to the floating snow house. They did not enter the floating snow house and were already on their way back to welcome Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang was not in a rush and still maintained his original speed. Along the way, he did not neglect his training. Instead, he was extremely focused and grasped each moment. The floating snow house was located in the middle north of the Xian Yuan Mound. The terrain was extremely high and for half of the year, snowflakes would swirl in the air. Thus, it was named the floating snow house. The mansion where the floating snow house was located was called the Silver Sky Mansion. In the middle north area, it was also a mansion that was second to none. Especially the floating snow house, they had shaken the middle north area. The surrounding mansions all regarded the floating snow house as the leader of that area. After all, the floating snow house was also one of the top powerhouses among the second-rate powerhouses. They were almost the strongest existence beneath the first-rate powerhouses. Similar to the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, they were major powerhouses ranked in the top 20. They arrived at the Silver Sky Mansion 10 days later. Qin Wushuang settled down in the capital city of the Silver Sky Mansion. He looked at the towering mountain in the north that pierced the sky. That was the main peak where the floating snow house was located. Now it was already dusk. Qin Wushuang and his friends had settled down in the inn. When they went out, they saw groups of people entering the city one after another. Clearly, that formation did not appear to be the local tyrant. The vigorous temperament made Qin Wushuang somewhat surprised. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 587. Qin Wushuang was experienced and knowledgeable. When he saw this situation, he already had some thoughts. However, at this moment, he did not want to cause too much trouble, so he did not investigate further. After staying at the inn for a night, Xiao Chen finished writing a visiting card and sent it to the floating snow house's branch in the capital city. The rules were similar to other places. To visit, one had to send a visiting card first. Although Qin Wushuang had an extraordinary relationship with Murong Su, he had not received her acknowledgement. Hence, sending a visiting card was a form of respect to the floating snow house. The next morning, Qin Wushuang received the notice as he wished. He set off for the floating snow house. When he was almost halfway up the mountain, Murong Su and Xiao Zhu had already been waiting for him there for a long time. "Young Master Qin, you are finally here." Xiao Zhu was overjoyed and quickly waved. Qin Wushuang saw Murong Su standing halfway up the mountain from afar. She looked like a blooming snow lotus, incomparably pure and holy. Under the morning sun, she looked even more pure and bright. Qin Wushuang felt an incomparable tenderness in his heart as he quickly walked over. For palms were intertwined. When they met again after a short separation, Murong Su missed him even more. Seeing her lover arrive, all the worries in her heart turned into joy. She kept saying in her heart, "Big brother Qin will definitely solve all the problems. He definitely will. Young Master Qin, this is the floating snow house. You and the young miss have to restrain yourselves. Otherwise, those elders and the like will talk even more." Xiao Zhu reminded him at this moment. Murong Su blushed and said softly, "Big brother Qin, after you go, you have to be more tolerant." When Qin Wushuang saw Murong Su's expression, he knew that she must not have had a good time in the past 10 days. He felt even more tenderness in his heart as he nodded and said, "Don't worry. I know what to do." The floating snow house seemed to be trying to intimidate Qin Wushuang. They were surprisingly orderly. Almost all the upper echelon had gathered in the main hall of the floating snow house. Qin Wushuang walked into the main hall in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. He was immediately surrounded by hundreds of pairs of eyes that focused on him. These hundreds of pairs of eyes were naturally the upper echelons and important disciples of the floating snow house. Junior Qin Wushuang pays his respects to Lord Murong and the various seniors. Qin Wushuang was not lacking in manners and greeted them one by one. Murong Su stood at the side and introduced him. Mu Rong Qianji, on the other hand, did not seem to have any hostility. A faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth. "Young man, we meet again. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. Back then, I offered a bounty of 100,000 to find you. Now you have come to my drifting snow house. Good, very good." When Murong Su heard his father's words, he calmed down a little. Although she was worried that everyone would make things difficult for Qin Wushuang, inwardly, she was determined. Regardless, she would stand on Qin Wushuang's side. She would not let the people of her family bully Qin Wushuang together. Ever since we parted at the Judgment Mountain Prefecture, I have greatly admired Senior Murong's demeanor. This time, it's truly a joyous matter that I have received such a good opportunity to visit Senior Murong. Hearing the words of Qin Wushuang, Murong Su was inwardly overjoyed. It seemed that her father and brother Qin had met harmoniously last time. As long as her father did not object, Murong Su would not be worried about anything. In the end, these people of her family only treated Murong Su as a chess piece and never thought about her. Therefore, she did not plan to change her mind because of these people's obstruction. Murong Qianji laughed. A while ago at the Judgment Mountain Prefecture, you were only an unknown junior. However, after a few months, you are already a famous young talent in the Xian Yuan Mound. It's indeed a joyous matter. I see the undeserved reputation as grass. My actions were only to protect myself, Qin Wushuang said modestly. Murong Qianji laughed and waved his hand. Drink the tea. Qin Wushuang picked up the teacup and was about to drink when that middle-aged man next to Murong Qianji, who had been observing Qin Wushuang, finally opened his mouth. Qin Wushuang, from an unknown person in the human countries, you shocked the world with a single brilliant feat in the Xian Yuan Mound. Indeed, not many young people have such skills. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly. Senior Qinhuan, you are overpraising me. This middle-aged man had a face full of vigor. He was Murong Qianji's little brother and Murong Su's uncle, Murong Qianhuan. He only laughed. I am not praising you, don't misunderstand. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and did not talk back. He took the opportunity to drink a mouthful of tea. This tea was brewed with the melted ice and snow from the high mountain and was extremely tasty. Qin Wushuang nodded and looked at Murong Qianhuan with a neither servile nor overbearing look. He waited for him to continue. He knew that since this Murong Qianhuan had been brewing for such a long time, he would not end it with just one sentence. Apparently, Murong Qianhuan had come prepared. After a moment of silence, suddenly, he stared at Qin Wushuang with a sharp gaze and said lightly, Qin Wushuang, do you know that while the entire Xian Yuan Mound is praising you, they are also ridiculing the floating snow house? Qin Wushuang trembled inwardly. Forgive me for being slow-witted, but the floating snow house has a clear reputation. How could they be humiliated because of me? You sure know how to play dumb. Before Murong Qianhuan had spoken, an elder next to him had spoken first. This elder was also one of the leaders of the floating snow house. His position was below the Murong Qianji brothers. He was the younger brother of the two brothers, Murong Qianshan, who had a fiery temper. Qin Wushuang had already received information about Murong Su. He knew that this person was an explosive person who would explode at the slightest provocation. Thus, he did not respond. On the contrary, Murong Su said in a light voice, Uncle Qianshan, on my way back from the outside, I did not hear many people scolding the floating snow house. Uncle, you did not step out of the floating snow house, yet you heard it? Murong Qianji shouted, Su do not be rude, sit down first. Murong Su did not dare to disobey her father as she retreated to her father's side and sat down. However, a faint layer of frost had covered her expression. Murong Su rarely blushed with anyone. It was the first time in her life that she had experienced such emotional fluctuations. Apparently, Murong Qianshan was somewhat surprised. Inwardly, he felt apprehensive. It seemed that this niece of his had changed somewhat after going out for a few years. She was much more resolute than before. Big brother, your daughter has grown up and her wings have hardened, Murong Qianshan said with a brooding tone. Murong Qianji said with a smile, when a child grows up, there will always be some changes. Third brother, don't lower yourself to the same level as a child. At any time, Mu Rong Qianji would always shield his daughter. She was his only bloodline and the apple of his eye. Mu Rong Qianshan nodded. All right, Su heir, now that you have grown up, you also don't think my words are pleasant to hear. In the years that you left, do you know how much pressure the floating snow house had shouldered for you? Murong Su said lightly. Uncle Qianshan, I shouldn't have had such pressure. There are so many powerhouses in the Xian Yuan Mound and so many young disciples. Everyone had gone out to train. It's not a big deal for me to go out. Su heir, if you say it this way, I will say a few words to you. Mu Rong Qianhuan said with a somewhat displeased tone. You are different from them. You had an engagement and ran away when the wedding day was approaching. Second uncle, I've never agreed to this marriage. It's also not what I wanted. Nonsense. Mu Rong Qianhuan rebuked angrily. You are simply being willful and making trouble. Su heir, you have changed. When you were young, you were so obedient. Now, who has bewitched you? How come you can't listen to advice? Second uncle, I have already grown up. I only know that for my own destiny, it's most reasonable for me to arrange it myself. The engagement is not a child's play. I have never thought about marrying someone I don't like. Second uncle, if it were your daughter, would you be willing to push her into the fire pit? To put myself in your shoes, you want me to marry Luo Ting because of the so-called bond of interest. You can live with your conscience, but have you ever thought about whether my niece would live a good life? Mu Rong Su did not complain like a torrential storm. Instead, she spoke slowly and leisurely. Like a murmuring brook, it gradually condensed into a turbulent flow. Mu Rong Qianhuan sighed and said, Su heir, as a member of the floating snow house, your destiny is not just your own destiny. It is closely related to the clan. You have always understood this point. Could it be that you don't understand? Murong Su shook his head resolutely. No, I only know that if a person can't control their own destiny and has no freedom, then it's better to die than to live. Second uncle, it's not that I don't understand your righteousness. However, I will repay the clan the same way they have always treated me. If the clan wants to push me into the fire pit, could it be that I have to sacrifice myself to repay the clan? You are simply disgraceful. Mu Rong Qianshan flew into a rage and said to Mu Rong Qianji, Big brother, look at your daughter. What is she saying? That's right. Big brother, if you don't discipline her, the first traitor of our floating snow house will appear. The other leader, Mu Rong Qianlin, who had been silent all this while, also spoke. Mu Rong Qianji still had an indifferent expression as he swept his gaze across the faces of the other three people. Everyone, do you think that settling accounts after the autumn still has any meaning to the floating snow house? Luo Ting is already dead, so the engagement is also annulled. You and I both know how absurd that engagement was. Now that the fire pit has been extinguished, from your words, it seems that you want to find another fire pit for my daughter to jump into, right? Big brother, what are you talking about? We are only concerned about the matter, not the person. Mu Rong Qianlin smiled apologetically. Big brother, you have doted on your daughter since she was young. This is nothing. However, this time, our floating snow house is really passive. Our reputation has been ruined. Mu Rong Qianshan glared at Qin Wushuang and shouted, Brat with the surname Qin, if I were you, I would shrink my head and not mingle outside. You still have the guts to come to our floating snow house? Do you truly think that the people of the floating snow house are made of clay and do not have the temperament of a peasant? Finally, the topic returned to Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang said, Senior Qianshan, please forgive me for speaking bluntly. If you feel that I, Qin Wushuang, have sinned at the floating snow house, then list out my sins. If I have something to say, I can defend myself. If I have nothing to say, I will accept it wholeheartedly if you scold me. Senior, since you speak without thinking, I will not accept it in my mouth nor in my heart. Mu Rong Qianshan slapped the table. You, a mere brat from the human countries, harbored evil intentions towards Su Er. You deceived her young age and ruined her reputation. Then, you enticed her to complain to the heavenly Emperor Mountain and caused the floating snow house to lose all face. If this is not a sin, then what is? There are still 3 more chapters. I will finish the update before midnight. Please continue to push for more monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.